To outline today's event, the webinar in its entirety will run approximately 5 hours, which includes Q&A sessions. And if you have questions now or during the webinar, please enter those questions into the Q&A chat pod. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. It's our pleasure to welcome for introductory remarks Dr. Jennifer McGuire, Director, Office of Quality Surveillance, Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, and CDER. Please join me in welcoming Dr. McGuire.
Thank you. Hey, I'm Jennifer McGuire. I am the Director of the Office of Quality Surveillance. It's my pleasure to welcome everybody and get our webinar on post-market reports kicked off. A quality product of any kind consistently meets the expectations of the user, and drugs are no different. Patients expect safe and effective medicine with every dose they take. Pharmaceutical quality is assuring every dose is safe and effective, free of contamination and defects. It's what gives patients confidence in their next dose of medicine. So, evaluating post market reports is part of the agency's surveillance function. And although my office is not the only office involved in the evaluation of post market reports, we do play a significant role. So, I think it's helpful to provide a bit of context about my office generally. So, I lead the Office of Quality Surveillance, and the vision of our office is to be the global benchmark for pharmaceutical quality surveillance. Our mission is to turn intelligence into insights and actions to promote the availability of quality medicines for the American public. So, a little bit more about the office. I think one way to potentially think about us is as the CIA for drug quality. We're a bunch of sleuths. So, we're helping to assure drug quality and availability. And we do this by using intelligence, data analytics, and our knowledge about the CGMP regulations and other quality policy to provide oversight of quality throughout the drug lifecycle. We do have a strong post market focus, but more and more we're using information from the post market space to inform our pre market decisions. And we also have a role in understanding and modeling supply chains. So, our role is mainly to foster supply chain reliability and to help mitigate shortage. So, again, welcome. Today, FDA will provide a primer on post market reporting. We will share insights on how we use post market reports to reduce uncertainty and enable effective knowledge management and make decisions. And I really want to emphasize that facilities are not penalized for submitting post market reports. Submitting reports can be a signal of a very healthy pharmaceutical quality system. So we encourage timely and accurate submission of field alert reports and biological product defect reports. Our goals of today are to understand the requirements for post-market reporting, to go over our expectations for these submissions, to go over how FDA uses post-market reports to facilitate our risk-based decision making, and to cover how we're modernizing the assessment of post-market reports. So a little bit more about our our presenters for today and what you can expect. So this morning, you'll hear from Melissa on the regulatory background and framework for post-market reporting, followed by Elise, who will walk you through the reporting expectations and a case study. And then we'll finish off the morning session with Alex and Nandini, who will brief you on how we are modernizing the oversight of these reports through the application of advanced analytics. And then later in our afternoon session, we'll focus on how we use these reports to reduce uncertainty and improve our risk-based decision making and oversight of quality. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to our Master of Ceremonies, Ray.
Thank you, Dr. McGuire, for providing those great introductory remarks, setting the stage to move into our presentations. And thank you for also introducing our four speakers, our lineup. So without further ado, we will launch into our list of speakers starting right now. Welcome with our first speaker, Melissa Furness.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for that introduction, Jennifer. So I'm Melissa Furness, and I'm a policy lead in the policy office in OPQ. And today I'm going to talk about field alert reports, biological product deviation reports, and consumer complaints and how these differ from one another. So our learning objectives today are consumer complaints and MedWatch reporting, an overview of FARS and BPDR reporting requirements. So we're going to talk about specifically what are the FARS and BPDR reporting requirements, who's responsible for reporting, how you report, and then go over questions and answers. Okay, so I'm now going to talk about MedWatch reporting. So a majority of serious reaction reports are received from healthcare professionals by completing a MedWatch Form 3500. However, consumers can self-report a serious reaction to a medical product by completing a MedWatch Form 3500 or 3500B. The 3500B is more of a consumer-friendly version of the form, so maybe a little simpler for folks to fill out. These self-reported serious reactions are often referred to as consumer complaints. Both forms can be found at the following web link. And the reporting of product quality-related reactions by consumers is voluntary under the MedWatch program. And I just wanted to stress that here today because our focus will be on product quality-related MedWatch reporting. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about 21 CFR 211.198, which outlines records and retention requirements for product quality-related consumer complaints. So 21 CFR 211.198 requires, among other things, that written procedures describing the handling of all written and oral complaints regarding a drug product shall be established and followed. The file regarding such drug product complaints shall be maintained at the establishment where the drug product involved was manufactured, processed, or packed, or such file may be maintained at another facility if the written records in such files are readily available for inspection at that other facility. A written record of each complaint shall be maintained in a file designated for drug product complaints. So I just wanted to highlight there are multiple requirements under 211.198, but these are sort of the big three that folks should familiarize themselves with. Okay, so challenge question number 1. If you want to self-report a serious adverse event, what form do you need to fill out? A MedWatch Form 3500, a MedWatch Form 3500B, or either A or B? So the answer is either A or B, though it may be easier for a consumer to fill out the Form 3500B, as this is more of a consumer-friendly version of the form. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about field alert reporting requirements that are outlined in 21 CFR 314.81. So FDA requires reporting of certain deviations and unexpected events that occur in drug product manufacturing. Any incident or defect concerning one or more of the following must be reported. So incidents that cause the drug product or its labeling to be mistaken for or applied to another article, bacterial contamination, any significant chemical, physical, or other change or deterioration in the distributed drug product, and any failure of one or more distributed batches of the drug product to meet the specifications established in its application. So I'm going to continue with FARS and the reporting requirements. So the purpose of FARS is to quickly identify quality defects in distributed drug products that may present a potential safety threat. FDA's field alert reports are authorized under 505K of the FD&C Act, and the requirements have been in effect since the agency published the final rule in 1985 that implemented the FARS reporting requirements that are currently outlined in 21 CFR 314.81. So I wanted to also mention that within 3 working days of receiving information concerning significant quality problems with distributed drug product, applicants of approved NDAs or ANDAs must submit a FAR to FDA to comply with the regulations. So now I'm going to go over an overview of BPDR reporting requirements as outlined in 600.14. So the manufacturer of a CDER regulated product that holds a biological product license and had control over the product when a deviation or unexpected event associated with the manufacturing occurred is required to submit a biological product deviation report to FDA as soon as possible, but no later than 45 calendar days from the date of discovery of information that reasonably suggests a reportable event has occurred. So FDA requires reporting of certain deviations and unexpected events that occur in biological product manufacturing, and as outlined in 600.14, the manufacturer must report such events associated with testing, processing, packing, labeling, storage, holding, or distribution if the safety, purity, or potency of distributed product may be affected by the deviation or unexpected event. So challenge question number 2. Are FARs and BPDRs required or voluntary? So A is required, B is voluntary, and C is depending on the incident and defect, both A and B. So the answer is A, required. Okay, so now next I'm going to talk about how to submit a field alert report. So FDA encourages all of industry to use the form 331A to submit FARs electronically, but we will accept paper submissions. Although submission of FARs solely in an electronic format is not currently required at this time, we recommend using the automated XML version of the form FDA 331A. So the form 331A can also be saved as a PDF document, printed and submitted in paper format if preferred or when necessary to satisfy the reporting requirements. So the form and the associated instructions can be found at the web link that I've included in this slide. So next I'm going to talk about BPDR reporting requirements as outlined in 600.14. So reports should be submitted to CDER DQRS reports at fda.hhs.gov using the form 3486. So to facilitate prompt processing of all incoming BPDRs, CDER strongly recommends that all information relevant to the BPDR be submitted in the form 3486. This should include the initial submission and all subsequent follow-up or final submissions. So the form 3486 and the associated instructions can be found via the web link that I've included here. So in summary, the reporting of product quality related consumer complaints is voluntary via the MedWatch program. FARs are required per 314.81 and must be submitted within 3 working days. And BPDRs are required per 21 CFR 600.14 and must be submitted within 45 days. So now we're going to do questions and answers, and then I'll turn it over to Elise. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elise Murphy, and I am the Supervisory CSO responsible for the post-market reports within OQS, Office of Quality Surveillance, which encompasses field alerts, biologic product deviation reports, and product quality MedWatch reports. Today, our learning objectives for abbreviated and new drug application for field alert reports and CDER biological product deviation reports, BPDRs, for non-blood, we will identify the type of information CDER expects in the submission, understand key components of these reports, understand the value of specific information about root cause investigation and corrective action and preventive action plans, and understand the correlation between measure terms when identifying root cause investigations. So let's identify the type of information CDER expects in a FAR submission. To identify the type of information FDA expects in a FAR submission for an NDA or ANDA applicant holder, the actual deviations that we expect are actually in the codified itself: bacterial contamination, chemical, physical, or change, or other change or deterioration in the distributed drug product, any failure of one or more distributed batches of the drug product to meet the specification, any information concerning any incident that causes the drug product or its labeling to be mistaken. All of these must be reported to the FDA district office that is responsible for the facility within 3 working days of the receipt by the applicant. So when an NDA or ANDA field alert report must be reported to the agency, you will see on the 3331A form that there is a box that we ask you to check for where the FDA ORA field office is for that particular product where it is manufactured. That gives our colleagues in ORA notification that this product is manufactured within their jurisdiction. And then we ask that the form also be uploaded via XML schema to the center with all of the fields completed. And we will go through the specific fields that we would like to see completed. So when an ANDA or ANDA applicant holder manufactures or distributes drug internationally and their product has a deviation, they are required to submit a FAR as well. However, they must go through their U.S. agent, which is codified in 314.50A5, who is responsible for reporting to the FDA district office where they are registered. So we indicated that FDA Form 3331A for the submission of an ANDA FAR has a structuredized reporting format. And let's go into a little detail as to the information that must be submitted to the agency. The firm name and the address of the manufacturing finished dosage product where the incident or deviation occurred. The manufacturer control number should be the same throughout the initial, follow-up, and final reporting without any suffixes or prefixes. The NDA or ANDA number, the NDC number, the generic name, and if there is a brand name as well, the dosage strength and package size, the lot number and expiration dates, and of course the volume of the lot numbers. Also, if you received any complaints for the particular batch in question that you are reporting, the date when notified, and how the problem was discovered, which also feeds into your root cause analysis. So the key reporting requirements are the measure product quality defect codes, a detailed description of the root cause investigation, and a detailed description of the corrective action and preventive action. We will get into a little bit more detail of these reporting requirements in a few moments. So let's look at measure coding for product quality. So let's give a little contextual background for how the product quality piece came into MEDRA. As you know, the Medical Dictionary for Regulatory Activities, or MEDRA, is a standardized medical terminology developed by the International Council for Harmonization of Technical Requirements for Pharmaceuticals for Human Use. The purpose was to facilitate sharing of regulatory information internationally for drugs, vaccines, and combination products. MEDRA is a global terminology used by regulatory authorities and industry throughout the regulatory cycle from pre to post-market for data entry, retrieval, evaluation, and presentation. We wanted to leverage this the MEDRA terminology, and so what FDA did was they came up with a proposed proposed 27th system organ class to MEDRA to incorporate product issues. We wanted to ensure that we could leverage this information and share product quality issues internationally of when there was an anomaly or deviation for drug products where there was a potential safety or risk associated. So we proposed the 27 SOC based on, of course, the FD&C Act, but specifically the current good manufacturing practices of 210 and 211, which ensures proper design, monitoring, and control of manufacturing processes and facilities that guarantees the drug product will meet the identity, strength, quality, and purity. So what was our rationale for leveraging MEDRA? Well, we looked at pharmacovigilance and adverse event and patient safety, and we thought to ourselves, could it be that if you have a product quality defect or a GMP failure, whether in a FAR or BPDR, that it could somehow intersect with adverse events? In other words, could the manufacturing defect manifest itself in an adverse event for patient safety? Yes. The answer is it could, not always, but yes, it could intersect.
So with our 27th SOC in hand, we went to the MSSO, which is the Maintenance and Support Service Organization, which is contracted by ICH with the technical and financial oversight of the MEDRA Management Committee, and we submitted our rationale for the 27th SOC and the product quality issues, the terminologies for the product quality issues. So ICH points to consider working group developed and maintains the MEDRA coding. And so there is a ICH MEDRA term selections points to consider document. And in that document, you'll find the product quality issues and its rationale for product quality coding.
So how does the MEDRA coding work? MEDRA coding works as a 5 hierarchical system, the beginning with the system organ class. In this case, the system organ class is product issues. That was, as I mentioned, the 27th SOC. Then there's a higher level group term. The higher level group term, or HLGT, is the product quality, supply, distribution, manufacturing, and quality system issues. Each term, you will notice, specifies the grouping or term that above it. So the higher level group term is product quality, it's product supply, it's product quality, supply, distribution, manufacturing, and quality systems. The higher level term is for a specific grouping, and then the preferred term provides you with the descriptor, and then the lower level term gives you the very specific identity of the deviation. So for example, we have here the product issues. As you see, there's one for devices, but there's also one for product quality, supply, distribution, manufacturing, and quality issues. Then you notice that there's a higher level grouping terms of manufacturing facilities, equipment issues, and then it goes through all of what we consider at FDA the 6 systems within the inspectional component. So a higher level manufacturing laboratory control issue would have an HLT of that very broad category, but then you could break it down into whether it was a manufacturing laboratory analytical testing issue, a laboratory controls calibration issue, and then you can break it down even further into the lowest level term, which is very specified, whether it's a manufacturing stability testing issue or whether it's an out of specification result, and you can break it down even from that. So each term has its own HLT, PT,
and LLT as well. So for manufacturing, another example, let's say you have a manufacturing materials issue. Manufacturing materials issue, the PT could be, was it testing? Was there a testing deviation? And if so, where did the testing deviation lie? Was it a manufacturing materials contamination issue? And then it breaks down to the LLT from there as well. Was it the API? Was it the excipient? It breaks down. The LLT specifies even further. And these terms also help with root cause evaluations and investigation. And same for contamination and sterility. These are just examples of how the measure coding and terminology are broken down. So let's look at expectations in root cause investigations. The agency expects, for root cause investigation, identify and provide a detailed description of the failure mode and effect analysis. Is the failure a process performance or is it a product quality issue? How are the systems integrated? Is there a trend or signal across batches? We do expect all of this information when you are providing us a root cause investigation. What is the pharmaceutical quality management system's response? What is the risk to patients? This is also found in ICH Q9R1 Quality Risk Management. For the corrective action preventive action plan, a detailed plan of the proactive measures that one is going to use to mitigate the risk is also encouraged. What metrics are in place, such as your quantitative, analytical, and microbial testing data to ensure reoccurrence of failure are quickly detected? And what is the communication plan of the quality management system to respond to and communicate failures? Critical quality attributes as defined by ICH Q8 in pharmaceutical development are physical, chemical, biological, or microbiological properties or characteristics that should be within an appropriate limit or distribution to ensure the desired product quality. So manufacturing defects may affect one of the or more of the following drug quality attributes: identity, strength, purity, and quality performance. When a critical quality attribute, such as an identity test, let's say the drug substance or drug product fails to meet established performance specifications, what type of testing would we want to see as part of your field alert report? Well, if there was a change in the manufacturing and formulation, we would want to see an FT near R, optical rotation, or melting point. So for your critical quality attributes for strength, if your assay is failing, we need to know, first of all, what methodology you're using. And as you're looking to provide the root cause analysis as to why your assay is failing, please specify the specific methodology that you're using, whether it's an NDA, ANDA method, stability indicating methodology that you have validated, or it is a compendial method. Also, for content uniformity, please specify the USP, the compendium 905, and for stability time points, any modifications to accelerated or control room temperature should be identified as well. For critical quality attributes, when impurity is found in your drug product and your profile is changing, we would want to see quantitative data and as found in ICH 3A or 3B for the degradation products, residual solvents. For degradation products, you might want LC mass spec or HPLC, residual solvents by elemental analysis. And when there's a chemical or microbial contamination due to, let's say, an objectionable pathogen, sterility, PCR, because you would want to know the exact type of pathogen that you are dealing with, and that would be part of your root cause analysis as well. So when there is a significant change to the quality performance of the drug substance or drug product, a summary should be provided of the description of the root cause, its effect to the drug substance or the drug product, and how it will overall affect the performance of the drug. Also demonstrated. So, for instance, we have a case study. A pharmaceutical company X manufactures an oncological drug called fluorouracil injection, USP lot 55555, with the expiration date of 2024. This product was packaged in a clear vial. At 3-month stability time point, the HPLC assay resulted in 85.0%. What type of root cause investigation should the company provide to FDA regarding this out-of-specification result? They did provide 3 working days. The company submitted an initial FAR. So the firm performed a retrospective review of their stability data at 0, 3, and 6-month time points. They reviewed the 0 time and the results were 90%, which were within the range from 90 to 110. But by the 3rd month, they noticed that the product was out of specification. So what type of documentation and data and testing plan should the firm perform? Well, a knowledge, of course, of the drug product is key. The container closure in this instance is a key factor because fluorouracil degrades so easily. So that should have been taken into account, and they excluded that. So let's identify the type of information CDER expects in a BPDR submission. A manufacturer who holds a biological product license and has control over the product when a deviation occurs must report it to CDER as indicated by 21 CFR 600.14. They are responsible, the BLA applicant holder is responsible for providing within 45 days from the date of discovery any information that may affect the product safety, purity, and potency within that particular biologic supply chain. So where there's a manufacturing, processing, packaging, labeling, storage, holding, and distribution, a BPD, and there's a deviation, a BPDR must be provided to the agency, to CDER, within 45 calendar days. For a CBER regulated biologic product, the products include blood products, blood derivatives, vaccine, gene therapies, cellular therapies, human cell tissue products, and that are intended for implantation. The medical devices that are involved in collection of processing and testing of screening of blood, HIV test kits, and certain blood products as well. But biologics transferred to CDER on June the 30th, 2003, monoclonal antibodies for in vivo, cytokines, growth factors, proteins for therapeutic use from animals or microorganisms. So all biologics required to file under BPDRs for any deviations under 21 CFRs, these will be reviewed by either CBER or CDER. In March of 2020, the biologics definition was redefined to include biologic products that are chemically synthesized. So the proteins that are chemically synthesized were now included in the biologics definition. So for Biological Product Deviation Reports, FDA has developed Form FDA 3486, which is a standardized reporting format that may be submitted in paper form by mail. The Form FDA 3486 is used to report biologic product deviation, whether it is a blood product or a non-blood product. However, blood products require a CLIA, Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendment number, whereas product quality BPDRs do not require a CLIA number. So in Form 3486, in Form FDA 3486, we expect, there is an expectation of the description of the deviation, an initial investigation description, the defect code, which is a 6-number defect code, for CBER or CDER, the product designation is there as well. Now, for the BPDR codes, it's broken down into a 3-tiered system. It's six digital codes. The first identifies the affected system. So here you see for non-blood products, incoming materials, specification, process controls, testing, labeling, product specification, quality control, and distribution. For the second level, it's a subset of the affected system. So you see here, stability testing failed, administration, quality control and distribution, the product distributed, shipping, storage, and packaging as well. And then, of course, on the third level, it contains more detailed information. So the 3486, similar to the 3331A for field alert report, requires detailed description of the deviation. It also requires a detailed description of investigation of the root cause, a detailed description of your CAPA as well, details or follow-up information, whether any additional reports are planned to be submitted. Now, for the CBER products, you have notification of the lots. And you also have this for CDER as well, impacted lots for non-blood products as well. But some of the common reporting errors that we are seeing for FDA 3486 is listing multiple applications or products under one form, reporting the incorrect center or office, having the reporting firm information that does not match our data, having the wrong inappropriate problem firm, inappropriate defect codes. We also have, they did not refer to the general instructions when preparing for the reported submission. So there is a website, a CDER BPDR website for submissions, recommendations for CDER BPDR program, and the link is provided. So what our recommendations are: 1 BPDR must be submitted per BLA application. Whenever possible, list the BLA application information during the drug reporting. Multiple lots of the same BLA product impacted by the same deviation be reported in 1 BPDR. Multiple complaints with similar root cause for 1 BLA product be reported in 1 BPDR, provided that these complaints were received within 45 days from the date of discovery. Whenever possible, indicate in the initial report whether additional follow-up or final reports are expected, and reports are to be submitted to CDER DQRS report mailbox. Custom reports attached to Form 3486 or any submission without Form 3486 is discouraged. So how to avoid so that the agency does not ask for additional information requests for a BPDR submission? Provide as much information of the description of the deviation that includes the defect and the scope. Provide a root cause analysis with clear and logical investigation. Include details for appropriate actions to prevent occurrence. Provide any current corrective and preventive action plans that are designed based on the root cause identified. Provide a BLA and relevant product information. Select the best presentation of the defect code from the current BPDR code list, and provide information accurately per the general instructions for the BPDR submission. Provide relevant data in the report to allow appropriate assessment or product quality evaluation, and provide information of all fields in the Form FDA 3486. As we indicated, you can submit a custom form, but it is discouraged. And please adhere to a commitment stated in the initial report. So in summary, when a product quality deviation occurs, the manufacturer and applicant holder should initiate a retrospective root cause analysis of the failure mode. It should be implemented based on a predefined protocol that includes affected lots and a sampling strategy for testing. This plan should outline critical control points of the manufacturing process and demonstrate performance of the drug or biologic product. When conducting a root cause analysis of a product or performance issue, the trace back of causality should begin at the lowest level where the failure occurred.
So when a deviation occurs, 3 working days are required for the submission of a FAR by the ANDA applicant holder and 45 days for a BPDR by the BLA applicant holder for biologics. The use of FDA Forms 3331A for FARs for small molecules and 3486 for large molecules and proteins for biologics are encouraged. These reports should include complete and accurate assessment of the detailed root cause investigations and corrective action and preventive action plans. So here's the first challenge question. Is there always a causal relationship between product quality deviations and adverse events?
No, there isn't always a causal relationship between product quality deviations and adverse events. However, there is a high probability that when a product quality deviation occurs, it may result in an unknown patient reaction. Collecting performance data and linking this data to the adverse event is advantageous. This can be an indicator to capture the adverse event and product quality. And our second challenge question, what is the value of having a standardized format for reporting drug product quality reports? It enables retrospective review of patterns and trends across the batches of finished products. This can help determine correlations for reporting manufacturing deviations and provide more impactful assessment.
So here are the references for field alert reports. Specifically, you'll see the link for the 3331A form, the field alert report guidance, and the Q&A for field alert reports as well.
As well as references for BPDRs and their links as well. I'd like to acknowledge the staff within OQS that actually reviews the FARs, MedWatch, and BPDRs.
And I'd like to thank you for your time and attention.
Hello and thank you everyone. My name is Alex Veman. I'm a Division Director in the Office of Quality Surveillance, and I'll be presenting alongside Dr. Nandini Rakala today on how we, the Office of Quality Surveillance, are modernizing post-market quality surveillance through the application of advanced analytics. I'm extremely excited to speak with you today on this topic. As we all know, the digital transformation is quickly evolving, and we are all researching how to leverage and maximize advances in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and other technologies to improve our overall decision-making process. So today, my presentation will cover an introduction into the overall risk problem. What is the business case? Why do we need to innovate? Why is continual improvement so important? Then I will be passing it over to Dr. Rakala to walk through a few case studies of how we are applying advanced analytics to facilitate more risk-based decisions with respect to post-market quality defect reports. Specifically, an example of how we are using machine learning and natural language process methods to more objectively rank risks. An example of how we are using statistical process control and natural language processing to proactively identify potential quality issues. And then concluding today with an overall summary. At the conclusion of our presentation today, attendees will better understand how we are defining our problem statement or risk problem and our overall business case for doing so. Attendees will also have a better understanding of how the machine learning process and how we are applying these types of processes in 2 case studies. Attendees will also leave with an understanding of how we are leveraging advances in technology in conjunction with SMEs and human intelligence to improve the overall risk-based decision-making process. As Jennifer spoke to earlier, the Office of Quality Surveillance's mission is to turn intelligence into insights and actions to promote the availability of quality medicines for the American public. To effectively meet this goal has become more and more complex due to increasing volume and variety of information available to OQS. This requires utilizing state-of-the-art and objective approaches that can help facilitate more effective and timely decisions, ultimately reducing overall risk and achieving comprehensive quality surveillance. We understand as technology advances, such as advances in computing power, cheaper data storage, etc., we also need to advance. And relying solely on human intervention and review, especially as the amount of information significantly increases, can lead to an increase in risks related to not being able to detect potential quality issues. However, it is also important to recognize that the application of these advanced state-of-the-art technologies, yes, they can lead to risk reduction, but they also can introduce other risks that need to be controlled. This is exactly why it is so important to work in close collaboration with our SMEs through the entire process to control for those risks and minimize any potential biases introduced by the deployment of these algorithms. You will be hearing today from Dr. Rakala on how we are developing and deploying advanced applications such as machine learning, SPC, and NLP in conjunction with SMEs to execute more effective risk reviews and risk reduction measures. Today's talk will be specific to how we are using these types of techniques on field alert report data. So why is this so important? We need to be able to improve the detectability of risks as part of OQS's oversight strategy. As stated earlier, this is becoming more and more complex as the amount of information grows. And also, as noted by Ms. Murphy in her talk, there's a tremendous amount of rich information in these reports to leverage to improve our overall understanding on the state of quality and improve our ability to make risk-based decisions. We are trying to do this through applying data-driven and objective approaches that can identify changes in the reporting habits with respect to establishments, application numbers, and product names, which facilitates more effective prioritization related to product quality issues. Speed is also critical. We need to improve and promote more effective and timely decisions through a process that utilizes quality risk management principles and cross-functional teams. Uncertainty is also key here. We are trying to reduce the overall level of uncertainty and fill knowledge gaps by enabling more effective knowledge management. This improves our overall decision-making capabilities, and field alert report and BPDR information can be leveraged to fill that gap with respect to the effectiveness around control strategies, CAPAs, amongst others. Through these modernization and continual improvement initiatives is to enhance the overall quality surveillance framework through the integration of predictive analytics and AI-based machine learning techniques. Why? Because we need to go beyond knowing what has happened to leveraging that historical information to predict what will happen in the future. As the amount of information grows, our oversight capabilities will lag if we do not leverage advances in modern technology such as faster computers, cloud-based interfaces, and centralized data storage platforms, amongst others. It also provides a competitive advantage through optimizing and automating business processes. And in the end, through the integration of human intelligence with machine learning intelligence, we can achieve our overall goal of a more proactive and comprehensive quality surveillance program that is data-driven, objective, and leads to reduced risks to patients. With that, I thank you and will now pass to my colleague, Dr. Rakala, who is a data scientist and visiting associate in the Office of Quality Surveillance, to walk you through 2 case studies that will show how we, the Office of Quality Surveillance, are utilizing advanced analytics to modernize our programs, and these will be specific to field alert reports.
Thank you, Mr. Riemann. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those of you joining us today from different time zones. I am Nandini Rakala, and I'm honored to be presenting to an esteemed audience today on the applications of advanced analytics in the post-market quality surveillance space. Inherently, advanced analytics is an intellectual convergence across interdisciplinary fields, where the mathematicians develop the underlying theories, the engineers work on scaling and automation, the economists bring to the table causal models for inference, and the statisticians make sure that everybody remembers to keep track of, well, as you may have guessed it, uncertainty. With that said, I'm humbled to be leading and representing a brilliant multidisciplinary team of subject matter experts who are the brains behind the research and development of some of these innovative tools within our office. All right, so diving into our first case study, here our objective is to prioritize incoming field alert reports using a data-driven and risk-based approach. Let us begin by answering three fundamental questions. Number one, what is machine learning? Two, what is natural language processing and why is it even needed? And number three, how do we validate the accuracy of the generated models? Well, there is no one way to define machine learning. So here's my take at it. Simply put, machine learning is the art and science of teaching machines to learn what comes naturally to humans, with the added advantage that machines can consume and process tremendous amounts of data simultaneously. When the data contains no predefined labels, it is called unsupervised machine learning, and when the data contains a defined label, it is called supervised machine learning. I'll be using the following words, labels, classes, and target interchangeably to describe the dependent output variable, and the words features, indicators, and predictors to describe the independent input variables. So the overarching goal of natural language processing, or NLP, is to identify keyword clusters within text data using algorithms for performing tasks such as clustering, pattern recognition, and topic modeling. So in short, machine learning is a subfield of artificial intelligence, and natural language processing is a subfield of machine learning. Now, the validation of these AI-generated models are performed extensively using their respective model evaluation metrics. I will get into some of the details of these concepts in my upcoming slides. Moving on to a high-level overview of the machine learning process cycle. It essentially consists of 4 iterative steps. Step 1 consists of pre-processing the field alert reports data. In step 2, we apply natural language processing algorithms, merging the output from 3 different topic models which complement each other. Step 3 involves developing a machine learning model which classifies an incoming field alert report into one of the 3 risk-based categories of low, medium, or high based on the data patterns and predictive text clusters from step 2. So what we deploy here is a hybrid model, which is a combination of both unsupervised and supervised machine learning methods. Finally, in step 4, we perform continuous fine-tuning of our hybrid model, integrating subject matter experts' knowledge and feedback into the machine learning process cycle loop. Essentially, what we incorporate at the core of this process cycle is a data-centric AI approach, which involves iterative data cleaning and continuous fine-tuning. Now, why is this needed? Because enabling machine intelligence combined with domain-specific human intelligence unlocks a higher degree of model accuracy, ultimately strengthening the true signals or patterns present in the data by minimizing the effect of random variation present in the form of noisy data. So here is a high-level overview of field alert reports prioritization, which is an innovative AI framework leveraging machine learning and natural language processing for risk-based prioritization of incoming field alert reports. Now, as part of the text pre-processing step for the natural language processing-based topic modeling algorithm, we remove stop words iteratively by eliminating redundant or unnecessary keywords using our subject matter experts' input. For example, frequently occurring words such as complaints, reports, etc. by themselves do not contribute to the context of the problem itself and are therefore considered as noisy keywords. This process involves a multidisciplinary analytics and subject matter experts collaboration by incorporating input on data cleaning, topic keywords refinement, rare events tagging, and labeling of risk-based target in a programmatic manner. This slide is a depiction of a high-level overview of the process. Again, I will cover each of these steps in some detail in my upcoming slides. We then automate the output generation by extracting key predictive insights from field alert reports data to help guide recommendations, which further serve as a prescriptive input into the risk-based decision-making process. All right. As you have already heard from Ms. Murphy in her presentation earlier, in 2017, FDA introduced the Form 3331A, which helped the agency move away from a manual data entry process to an automated system of receiving the field alert reports. Essentially, the field alert report document structure consists of application number, application type, product name, generic or brand, a description of the problem, dosage form, etc., among other fields. We then start with cleaning the collected field alert reports data by structuring and removing any duplicate entries. We look for misspelling errors, analyze the variable distributions, along with performing preliminary exploratory analysis. Now, data must be reviewed and mapped to ensure that there are no bottlenecks in the data collection process. We also look into the data patterns for both linear and nonlinear relationships, including but not limited to any underlying irregularities in the data, such as missingness analysis. Finally, we perform feature engineering and feature selection as part of the data pre-processing phase. These steps are extremely important because a set of good input predictors is a representation of the data available to best characterize the underlying problem. Now, let me further expand on each of these concepts here. Missing data or missing values can occur when we don't have data reported for certain variables, which may happen for many reasons, such as incomplete data entry, among others. The three types of missingness analysis that we perform include the first one, missing completely at random. This implies that the missing data are randomly distributed across the variable and unrelated to other variables. However, in practice, it is hard to meet this assumption because true randomness is rare. The second type of missingness analysis is the missing at random analysis. I realize this term is a bit of a misnomer because the data missing at random are not actually missing at random. Here, the missing data are not randomly distributed, but they are accounted for by other observed variables. Now, the last kind of missingness condition that we analyze is for the missing not at random data, which means that the missing data here systematically differ from the observed values. It is important to account for this type of missingness because oftentimes we may have a biased data set if this condition is not accounted for. Therefore, we apply advanced imputation methods in such scenarios to account for the same. An example of the missing not at random condition would be a hypothetical survey where certain categories of respondents decline to provide an answer for their own specific reasons. As a result of which, the missingness becomes a function of the very variable that we might be interested in analyzing. We also analyze for multicollinearity, which is to check if several independent variables within our model are highly correlated. Since multicollinearity, if present among independent variables, will result in less reliable statistical inferences. And if needed, we perform feature engineering, which is the process of transforming the raw data into features that better represent the underlying problem, thereby resulting in improved model accuracy on unseen data. Finally, feature selection is performed as part of the data pre-processing phase while training the machine learning models. The goal here is to find the best set of features or input variables to build optimized predictive models, thereby maximizing the accuracy and minimizing the loss function. So, moving on to our first natural language processing model. Now, this is an unsupervised topic model. Generally speaking, topic modeling is a type of statistical tool which is used to assess the topics being discussed in a set of documents. It consists of a two-step process, assuming that each document talks about a few different topics, while each of the underlying topics are denoted by a distribution of keywords. Our NLP Model 1 incorporates both the corpus structure and document metadata into the topic modeling process. Here, we refer to the text fields within each field alert report document as the corpus. And the field alert report document characteristics such as application type, product name, dosage form, etc. constitute the metadata. Standard topic models cannot capture document characteristics. Hence, we leverage this NLP model to partially pull information from similar field alert report documents. Next, the type of application or dosage form may affect how the topic is being discussed. For example, needles breaking versus tablet extract. Therefore, in this NLP model, we can specify a variable as affecting topic prevalence, topic content, or both. Topic prevalence is defined by the variables affecting the frequency for which a topic is discussed. And topic content refers to the variables affecting the words used within a given topic or how a topic is discussed. Hence, the structure of a field alert report document can affect both the topic prevalence and topic content. In our second NLP model, we develop logical rules to code rare events, for example, using and or distance operators, etc., incorporating our subject matter experts' input. We also perform misspelling analysis, part of speech tagging, creating newly emerging topic clusters, which include groupings of keywords identified in a document collection. Now, top 5 terms with highest relevancy scores are used to identify a particular topic. What do we mean by a relevancy score? Well, a relevancy score is a performance metric which indicates how well a document satisfies a rule or model. And the perfect match has a score of 1, which reflects a 100% match. Okay, so our third and final NLP model is an optimized topic model where we develop n-gram models, specifically bigram and trigram models as part of our text pre-processing phase, along with the removal of stop words. Now, what's an n-gram? It is a sequence of n tokens or words. For example, a bigram or 2-gram are 2-word sequences that always appear together, such as broken vials, foreign materials, sterility failures, etc. While a 3-gram or trigram is a 3-word sequence such as field alert reports, out of specification, out of control, etc. The n-gram language model predicts the probability of a given n-gram within any sequence of words in the language of the field alert reports text. The final text pre-processing step involves lemmatization, which converts a keyword to its meaningful base form called a lemma, considering the context for the creation of data dictionary and corpus. So let me give you some examples here. The words processes, processing, or processed will be converted to its base form process. The NLP model parameters are then optimized based on maximizing the model accuracy and minimizing the number of topics. Finally, the NLP algorithm calculates and assigns dominant topic probability distributions across the entire population of field alert reports. On your left, you can see a word cloud output of topic clusters generated using the field alert reports text data deployed on the optimized NLP topic model. and I will be covering the optimal model generation, validation, and selection process in my next slide. So we developed this hybrid model by combining the above three NLP models, validating each of the model runs using 20 to 25 iterations of topic models. The number of iterations should be large enough to accurately estimate the topic model, but small enough to complete the computations in a reasonable time. Okay, so now we move on to the optimized topic model selection process. In this graph, the x-axis represents the number of topics and the y-axis represents the coherence values for the same. Now, what's a coherence score? It is a quantitative measure of evaluating the performance of a topic model. So a higher coherence value implies a better topic model. However, the goal here is to not only maximize the coherence values, but also to simultaneously minimize the number of topics which account for both the model accuracy and model complexity in a multi-objective optimization problem. On your right, you can see the output table of the coherence values for the different topic model runs, starting with a minimum of 2 topics to a maximum of 19 topics. As you can visualize from the coherence plots to your left, when the number of topics equals 4, the NLP model reaches a global maximum, which is the optimum value with a maximum coherence score of 0.565 for a minimum of 4 topics. The graph displayed on this slide is a 2-dimensional visualization of the optimal NLP topic model plotted in the form of an inter-topic distance map. Here, each bubble or circle on the left-hand side represents a topic cluster. So the larger the cluster size, the more prevalent is the topic defining it. And a good topic model is characterized by having large, non-overlapping circles scattered throughout the chart instead of being clustered in one quadrant. Now, the output of the salient keywords defining a topic cluster forms the area of the respective circle. Therefore, you can think of the area of each circle being proportional to the frequency of keywords within that cluster. Okay, so this slide takes us to the final step of the hybrid machine learning NLP model evaluation phase. The output from our final hybrid model is displayed here, and please kindly note that these plots have been generated using dummy data for illustration purposes only. We compare the model performance metrics and evaluate the accuracy of the models using metrics defining the true positive rate, false positive rate, true negative rate, and false negative rates. We then interpret the predictions from best performing machine learning classification model using both local and global interpretability methods. Now, it is extremely important to demystify the black box model predictions by interpreting what each prediction means and how it is used to support key decisions with utmost accuracy. So we plot feature importances as well as Shapley values. Now, let me expand a little bit more on what a Shapley value means. Given the current set of feature values, the contribution of a feature value to the difference between the actual prediction and the mean prediction is the estimated Shapley value. It is a mathematical method to support key decisions with utmost accuracy using a concept derived from game theory. All right, so putting together all the steps I covered thus far in this first case study, here is a one-slide summary of the entire process using a life cycle approach based on the hybrid ML-NLP model for a risk-based predictive prioritization of incoming field alert reports. Now, this is a comprehensive quality surveillance model, which brings us to the conclusion of our first case study. With that, here comes your first challenge question, and you have 15 seconds to answer it. And yes, I will be timing it. Okay, so Shapley value is a mathematical method for model interpretation derived from which of the following concepts? A, game theory. B, topic modeling. C, nonlinear programming. And D, you have no idea. Okay, so your time starts now. And the correct answer is A, game theory. Named in honor of Lloyd Shapley, who introduced it in 1951 and won the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences, Shapley values provide a principled way to explain the predictions of nonlinear models. And if you have watched the movie A Beautiful Mind about the mathematician John Nash, he was one of the key pioneers of game theory. And being a mathematician myself by nature, I couldn't help but re-watch this movie in preparation for today's talk. Okay. Moving on to our second case study. This is an application of advanced analytics using quality signal detection and topic modeling of field alert reports. Let us start by talking about the signal detection methodology. Here, we identify changes in the reporting habits with respect to establishments, application numbers, and product names to prioritize resources and identify potential product quality signals. For this application, we created a function that utilizes statistical process control charts to flag entities with unexpected changes in their quality defect reporting habits. Now, what's a control chart? It is a graph used to study how a process changes over time. The control limits are plus or minus 3 sigma deviations from the center line. I will not get into the mathematical details behind these control charts, but I would like to mention here that we use a combination of traditional U and Laney U prime attribute control charts. These attribute control charts account for false positives, over-dispersion, under-dispersion, and varying sample sizes, making them ideal for this application. So the reason for using Laney U prime attribute control charts is that it accounts for over-dispersion by taking into consideration the correction for large sample sizes. The out-of-control points are flagged using an intersection which provides us with optimal signals, thereby taking advantage of both types of attribute control charts. We also consider a historical range of 12 and 9-month baseline data to flag the signals, and the sites flagged with repeat out-of-control points are further escalated. To define the context surrounding the signals, we developed and deployed a natural language processing model to mine through the text columns within the field alert reports data to discover topic clusters and commonly occurring problems across the network of regulated facilities and products in an automated manner. This slide here describes the application of natural language processing algorithms to identify topic clusters and map commonly occurring problems across the network of regulated products and facilities. The NLP model here assigns dominant topic cluster probability distributions across the entire population of field alert reports data. The results are then merged and streamlined into an interactive dashboard serving as an interface for automated communication of detected signals and problem clusters. Now, the established processes can be run at any frequency to identify entities with reporting habit changes, and the topic models can be used to assign dominant topic cluster distributions across the entire population of post-market surveillance reports. All right, so the final discussion topic that I'm going to be covering today as part of the application of advanced analytics is the prescriptive phase of the life cycle-based approach for comprehensive quality surveillance. This is a proactive risk-based decision-making using the identified signals. This risk-based decision-making involves a three-step process. First, the flagged output from out-of-control points using the signal detection model feed as an input into the NLP algorithm. Second, the NLP model generates emerging topic clusters as well as recurring patterns of problem clusters. Finally, the output from the model is used as an input for proactive decision-making for the prioritization of high-risk issues. Which now brings us to our final challenge question. Okay, Are you ready for this one? Here we go. Which of the following statistical attribute control chart is appropriate for correction of large sample sizes? By large, I mean n greater than at least 1000. And your options are P chart, NP chart, C chart, or a U prime chart. And your time starts now. So the correct answer is a U prime attribute control chart. The U prime control chart uses Laney's correction for large sample sizes. Typically, when we see that the control limits do not look right or they look too narrow with many data points appearing to be out of control, this problem is referred to as overdispersion. It usually occurs when the assumptions of a binomial distribution for defectives or Poisson distribution for defects is not valid. Laney's P prime and U prime charts are a preferred alternative in these scenarios. In summary, what I have covered so far through these case study applications of advanced analytics is how comprehensive quality surveillance can be achieved through a life cycle approach based on integrating human intelligence with machine intelligence, which can further be used to inform key indicator variables, help us proactively prioritize reviews, and allocate optimal resources. Descriptive analytics is about what happened in the hindsight. Predictive analytics is about what will happen, which is an insight. And prescriptive analytics is about what will make it happen, which is the foresight. Therefore, accurate predictions are not an end in themselves, but a means to taking high-quality, risk-based actions. And as Mr. Wieman mentioned earlier, indeed, these are exciting times in the digital era, one that is fascinating with the rise of big data and artificial intelligence. However, contrary to the hype, the basic mathematical concepts underlying artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms have existed for decades. But what we have seen in the past couple years is the implementation of these methods leveraging cutting-edge technology, moving beyond what was once considered a nice-to-have toolbox to a must-have advanced analytical toolkit. And no, I am not yet talking about the AI-enabled chatbots yet. At least not until we explore what these technologies are currently good and not good at doing, and how it might affect the way we work as they mature. Lastly, I would like to give you a call to action, and here it is. Let us work together to promote public health through improving global pharmaceutical product quality. We are a team, and together we can really make a difference. So by all means, please pass this on, as I believe learning is contagious, and there is no better time than now. With that said, I would now like to conclude our presentation for today by thanking you all for letting us borrow your time and attention for the past 35 minutes and making it this far. I would also like to thank the organizers of the CDER SBIA seminar for this opportunity to speak today. Alex and I are here to answer any questions that you might have for the next 10 minutes or so before we take a break. We will be meeting you again at the panel discussion to answer any remaining questions that you may have, and we look forward to receiving your feedback. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for all the great presentations. We'll now enter our very generous and expanded Q&A session. If you haven't had a chance to enter your questions into the Q&A chat pod, please do so now. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. Looks like we have some questions coming in right now, and the first group of questions is directed to Elise Murphy. And here is the first question for Ms. Murphy. Does FAR apply for any drug products, including biologics?
So thank you so much, Ray, for the question. Biologic deviation reports, BPDRs, are for biologics, whether they are a blood or non-blood products. Field alert, and for the larger molecules. For the smaller molecules, the field alert reports are the way for NDAs and ANDAs is the mechanism to report a deviation. For the field alert reports, as Melissa and I and others have said, it is a three-day working, three working days. And for biologics, it is 45 days. Thank you, Murray.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving on to the next question for Ms. Murphy is the following. For biological vaccines regulated by CBER, BPDR still applies. Is my thinking correct?
Ray, thank you for the question. Yes, for vaccines, BPDRs are required as well. Anywhere in the manufacturing chain of the cells, you must report if there is a deviation, whether it's packaging, whether it's labeling, whether it's manufacturing. Anywhere in the biologics chain, one must report a deviation. Thank you, Ray. I hope I was clear.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have a few more questions for Ms. Murphy, and here is the next question. Who assigns the manufacturer control number? Is this the applicant or is it the manufacturing side?
That's a very good question. The actual manufacturing number should be, well, the applicant should work with their manufacturer to come up with the code that they will provide on the field alert report. But one thing I want to note is the number. Let's say you submit an initial field alert report. You haven't, you're still working on a root cause analysis. And so you've provided your 3 days, you've provided to the agency your field alert report, and you don't have all the specifics, if you will, regarding your root cause or your CAPA. And so you provide an initial report. The manufacturer control number should not change whether you submit an initial, a follow-up, or a final report. So to answer the question, we do not at the agency come up with this number. It's the actual applicant and working along with the manufacturer to come up with the field alert, the manufacturing control number, the MCN number. But whatever number you come up with, first of all, you should have a plan in place. What is this number? And it should be specific for that deviation throughout the reporting of your FAR. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a couple more questions for Ms. Murphy. Here's one that just came in, and this is the question. Why is there such a large reporting timing difference between FAR versus BPDR?
So, Ray, thank you so much for that question. And we do get this question from time to time. The reason why there is such a difference in reporting time frame is for the biologics. It takes time to actually grow cell cultures, and so it was found that the biologics folks needed additional time. But we have We have also heard from small molecules that 3 days isn't enough reporting time, but for now, we are sticking with the 3 days, but that's the reason, because for biologics, it does take time to grow cells. So, that's why there is such a difference in the reporting structure. So thank you, Ray.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got one more question that just came in from Ms. Murphy, and here's the question. If a drug product is approved under an NDA or an ANDA and only is distributed internationally outside of the United States, for example, there's no domestic U.S. distribution, are they still required to submit an FAR?
So thank you so much for the question, Ray. Yes, any drug product marketed under an approved NDA or ANDA, whether distributed domestically or internationally, are subject to field alert report requirements. So they're still under, if you've been approved for an NDA or an ANDA, yes, you will still have to submit a FAR, whether domestically or internationally. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. Moving on to our next panelist, we have a few questions that came in for Melissa Furness. And here's the first question from Ms. Furness. Can a company search, view, and be aware of complaints reported directly to FDA by consumers?
Hi, Ray. Thanks for that question. Apologies in advance, too, for my voice today. I've been battling laryngitis for a few days. So there is a FAIRS public dashboard that's available to the public. And so, the intention of this dashboard is to sort of give visibility to the public regarding complaints that FDA's receive from the pharmaceutical industry, healthcare providers, and consumers. We could perhaps follow up with the individual that asked the question with a link to that site as well, if that would be helpful.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have another question that was directed towards two presenters, and one of the presenters was Melissa Furness, Ms. Furness. And here's the question. Could you please confirm that FARs are only required for drug products with an approved NDA or ANDA application?
Sure. So, FARs are post-approval reports. So, yes, FARs are for approved product reporting.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a couple more questions that came in from Ms. Furness. And here's the next question. Do sponsors need to submit a BPDR during the review of a BLA?
So a similar response there, BPDRs are also post-approval reports. So the answer would be once it's approved, they would need to start reporting. Thanks.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving on to our next question from Ms. Furness. Is a root cause analysis expected to be included in the initial 3-day FAR submission?
So an initial FAR submission is expected to be include a root cause analysis. However, we understand that your root cause analysis may be incomplete at the time of your initial FAR submission. If this is the case, we would expect you to submit a final FAR submission that includes the root cause, corrective action, information to substantiate the corrective action, and a final FAR submission. Thanks.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got another question on FAR submission, slight deviation from the last question, and here it is. Does the FDA expect to receive both an initial and a final FAR submission?
So an applicant's initial and final FAR submission could be one and the same. If an applicant's initial submission includes the root cause analysis, corrective action, and then information to substantiate their corrective action. If the initial FAR submission does not include all of this information, then we would expect to see a final FAR submission that does. Thanks.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got another question about root cause analysis, and here's the question from Ms. Furness. Is a root cause analysis expected to be included in the initial 45-day BPDR submission?
I would say similarly, as for FARs, we would expect the initial BPDR submission to include a root cause analysis. However, we again understand that it could be that your analysis is yet complete. If this is the case, then we would expect to see a final BPDR submission that includes the root cause, corrective action, and information to substantiate the corrective action in a final FAR BPDR submission. Thanks.
Thank you for responding to that question. We got another question on submissions that is sort of a deviation of the last one, just slightly. Can an initial BPDR submission and the final BPDR submission be one and the same?
So yes, they could be one and the same if you've completed your root cause, and the BPDR also includes your corrective action and information to substantiate the corrective action in the initial. Thanks.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. Moving on to our next panelist, we have a few questions that came in for Alex Veman. And here is the first question. As a proactive measure, do you detect signals possibly indicating that a site is not submitting an FAR?
Thanks, Ray. That's a really good question. And as Jennifer mentioned in her opening presentation, as part of our mission and our remit within the Office of Quality Surveillance, it is to be more proactive and predictive. And although this question is related to that, one of the things that we're trying to do, and we've deployed our ways and models outside of what Nandini and I have presented that utilize historical data and reporting patterns as well, not just related to field alert reports, but pending that with other data we have about facilities to predict the probability, for example, of an establishment to submit a field alert report, and then cross-referencing that after the fact with the sites where we did not get any field alert reports, to then marry up to say, okay, well, which facilities would we have predicted at a very high probability that we would have expected a field alert report, and we didn't get any, right? And then we use that intelligence to drive different decisions and identify, as a potential signal, right, to follow up with, and or other means. But so the answer is yes. We do have strategies in place to try to be a little bit more predictive about this and utilize that and complement it with some of the other information and intelligence we have to make a better decision. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question from Mr. Veman is the following. Can there possibly be a signal detected due to a trigger in the submission of FARs following a recent inspection?
Another great question. And in short, I would say, yes, there is a possibility for this. And that's why it's very important, as Nandini mentioned in her talk, that we marry up this, the machine intelligence with human intelligence and complement that with recent information we have. So when we detect a signal via some of the strategies that Nandini and I addressed today, we can't use that in isolation to move forward. We have to complement that and provide context to look at, okay, recent information about this facility, for example. If there was a recent inspection and we noticed that that inspection, one of the observations related to that inspection was not submitting field alert reports, And so we see this stream of field alert reports coming in, then we know that signal is probably based upon the very recent inspection. So that's why it's very, very critical that we marry up the signals that we get using these different algorithms and analytical approaches with the intelligence and context that we can complement it with. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving on to the next question from Mr. Veman. Would you please describe some of the proactive actions taken by the agency using the detected signals?
Yeah, another really good question, and there's a few examples that I can address briefly. One of the examples is, as we detect these signals, looking specifically for an establishment, for example, as we detect a signal, to then see, okay, well, is there an upcoming inspection related to this establishment, and how can we use that inspection to inform? How can we use that signal to inform the upcoming inspection to make it a more effective, and work with our ORA colleagues to potentially address this? Other ways are potentially if we are observing signals related to our MRA partners and really working with our MRA partners to pass forward this information and intelligence as part of our working collaboration with them. So those are a few examples of how we've taken the information and proactively worked with our business partners, both internal to FDA and external, to address as timely as possible.
Thank you for responding to that question, Mr. Veman. We've got just a couple more questions that came in, and here's the next question. As more advanced manufacturing processes are being deployed, how do you ensure that your training data are continually monitored for performance improvements?
Yeah, thanks, Ray. And I'll start, and then I'll actually ask my colleague Nandini to also chime in as well. But this is a really important question and something that we should address. And that as part of modeling and using models using machine learning algorithm, we're trying to minimize potential biases introduced by the data that we build the model with. So essentially, for a model to be performing the way in which we want it to perform, the data that we build the model has to be as representative of the current population as possible. And as more advanced technologies are being deployed at establishments, advanced manufacturing techniques, emerging technology, that's going to introduce new kinds of insights and potential problems that are observed at these establishments, as well as the corrective and preventive actions that are deployed to mitigate these. So we need to continuously, monitor the data coming in to make sure that we're accounting for these new emerging themes, right? So the models we're deploying are the most representative as possible, and we're minimizing bias because we don't want to make a wrong decision, whether it be we miss a signal or we overreact to a signal. So at this point in time, I would like to offer my colleague Nandini to provide any additional insight.
Hello. Thanks, Alex. I think you're spot on. So one more thing that I would like to add here is that periodic model training, review, and monitoring, to account for emerging patterns, themes, and trends are extremely crucial. And I love this question because right now, we have two interdependent things to consider, or, two missing links, if you will. First, there must be a system of metrics demonstrating real business value. So these are like the cultural requirements that a coherent, robust, and consistent data strategy demands. So we need to make sure that the models that we are building are trustworthy by making sure the AI pipeline is transparent, by making them interpretable, unbiased, robust, while at the same time preserving privacy. So we use a series of decision making in integrating the machine intelligence with human intelligence to make sure that as more advanced processes are being deployed, we are continuously reevaluating our training data for any emerging patterns and themes, and then retraining our models such that they are more accurate, more predictable, and more addressing the fact that we are also taking into consideration the emerging technology and the emerging requirements and the patterns that we see in the data. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got one more question that came in as a combination question directed to Mr. Beeman and Dr. Rakala, and we'll go to Mr. Beeman first. And here's the question. Overall, how does your deployed process help promote public health in general?
Thanks, Ray. And that's, that's a really good question to, why are you doing this? What is the business case? And I think, as a lot of us have talked about, right, as more and more, Jennifer spoke to it in her presentation, as the Office of Quality Surveillance, we have access to a lot of information, right? And as this information and data are growing at an exponential scale, as well as technology is growing at an exponential scale, it's our duty, right, to try to integrate these advances in technologies with human context and human information and human ability to provide context to really reduce risk, right, and ensure that we have strategies that are applying, really effective quality risk management principles to identify emerging things, to identify where we have hazards, to deploy a strategy that's going to either control or reduce risk down to an acceptable level. And then, as Nandini pointed out in her second case study, to then have a strategy and a process to do continual risk reviews, right? And ensure that, as people are implementing corrective actions and preventive actions, right, are we seeing signals related to recurring problems and things like that would be an indication of a potential, effectiveness of CAPAs and things like that. So I think that's why it's really important we have strategies that are employing a lot of the quality risk management principles and go through a life cycle to, in the end, reduce risk down to an acceptable level. But at this point, since the question was directed to both of us, I'll let my colleague Nandini also provide insight.
Thanks, Alex. I think you made some really good points here. And to complement what you've already spoken about, I would like to add that we can also gain valuable insights by, again, placing our human experts at the center of our AI outcomes, thereby if we, contributing to the efficiency of the overall value chain. And the true value, right, to promoting patient health lies in being proactive about the risk-based decisions arising from predicting data patterns, correlations, associations, right? And when we run these kinds of predictive analytical models, signal detection models using advanced AI and machine learning, we are identifying all these high-risk issues. But we are not really saying that the facilities identified may or may, they might be experiencing a quality control issue, or it might just be a false signal. So therefore, it's extremely important that we conduct further investigation by our Office of Quality Surveillance experts. And in complement to that, we also use model interpretation, right? And I spoke to this also in my slides about how it's really important to demystify the black box machine learning model. So we do have highly advanced model interpretation techniques such as Shapley values for global interpretation. So essentially to help us determine what are the factors that are important in driving these potential signals, right? So these are some of the ways and some of the mathematical tools that we implement to discover any global factors, local trends driving a particular model prediction. And as we all know, since the big data revolution, this conversation has changed radically, and enabling us with these possibilities of using and processing all kinds of data, both structured and unstructured, to really help us understand and promote public health, our environment, and more. I'll stop there and see if there are any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving on to our next panelist, who's already just finished responding. We have a few more questions that just came in for Dr. Nandini Rakala. And here's the first question for Dr. Rakala. Do we have any software available to track everything?
Yeah, I think that's a great question again. And let me think for a minute here. So software in terms of, I can think about it in terms of two things, right? The first is, as you've heard from all the presentations so far, in 2017, FDA introduced this Form 331A for submitting failure reports, which helped the agency move away from this manual data entry to an automated system of receiving failure reports. Now, to add on to that, what we have done is we have moved from traditional data repositories to a cloud-based interface, which serves as a central intelligence to deploy all our machine learning NLP models. So we not only digest the incoming data in a cloud-based environment, we also pre-process the data and have gone into really details about the different pre-processing methods that we deploy there. So all that happens in that one central cloud-based interface. And needless to say, I've always been fascinated by math, and now I'm fascinated by the math defining the data. So we really researched and developed and deployed a combination of these models in this hybrid format, and worked on automating the whole process. So in summary, the short answer is yes, we do have a centralized cloud-based format that we deploy on a periodic basis, and we monitor for continuous improvements. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a few more questions that came in from Dr. Rakala, and here's the next question. Why is it important to account for missing data?
All right, again, thanks for that question. Where do I start, right? Missing data is a massive topic in itself, one that is often of the utmost importance. Because missing data, if not addressed in the appropriate manner, can lead to misleading results. And this can happen by introducing bias if it's not accounted for in the first place, right? So I can talk about a couple steps here to ensure that the missingness is really taken care of in a statistically appropriate manner, right? Number one, we need to ensure that the data are coded correctly, and then identify any missing values within each variable. One way we can do that is to look for patterns of missingness, check for associations between missing and observed data, and then decide on how to handle missing data. So let me give you a small example here. Let me think of a good one with respect to patients. So for example, right, a comparison of the distribution of observed variables for patients with specific missing data to the distribution of those variables for patients for whom the same data present can provide insights into the type of missing data occurring. Another method is to use sensitivity analysis for missing data. This can really help evaluate the robustness of results based on the differing missing data assumptions. And I've already spoken about the three types of missing data: the missing completely at random, missing not at random. I'll not get into those details here, but essentially speaking, this is a very important pre-processing step before we even do any sort of model training and model development and deployment. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a couple more questions that we have for Dr. Rakala, and here's the next question. How do you define a process to be in a state of statistical control?
Thank you for that question. I think this is a tricky question, but I think I can try justifying the statistics behind it. So let me start by saying, statistical process control is really not about statistics. It's not about the process control. It's not about conformance to specifications. What it really is about the continual improvement of processes and outcomes, right? So with that said, by distinguishing changes in numbers that represent change in the underlying process, we really segregate the signal from the noise, right? So here, in order to truly define a process to be in a state of statistical control, we need to make sure that common cause variation is the only variation present in the system. Then the system can be said to be in a state of control. Again, there are two types of variations: special cause, common cause. But what is important to keep in mind here is just because all the points fall within the control limits don't necessarily mean that your process is working just fine, right? So control charts are typically an indicator for out of norm rather than an indicator that everything is working fine. So there are probabilities that your process is working in statistical control. I hope that helps answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a couple more questions that came in for Dr. Rakala, and here's the next question. Can the developed models deployed currently for the field alert reports data be applied to other post-market reporting data such as BPDRs?
Thank you for that question. I applaud this question, and I'm sure this is a burning question in many people's minds. So I would like to say that while in machine learning, right, it is really hard to have a one model fits all mentality. Yet these are data-centric methods which can be applied to any post-market reports data or any data involving text, as you will. The data fitting process here is more about the data than the model itself. So while the short answer is yes, a go-to model that usually fits the field alert reports data well, would not necessarily mean that it would also fit the BPDRs as it is without going through any data cleaning. Again, that would be a big assumption because as we all know, through the presentations, we've seen the differences between the field alert reports versus the BPDRs data, and the BPDRs might have an entirely different distribution. So therefore, before we deploy these models, our focus is also on the BPDR data cleaning and mapping process, first and foremost, right? To make sure that the data we have is of high quality and consistency, so then we can then deploy all these machine learning models for making the same kind of predictive, for getting the same kind of predictive insights as we've seen through the deployment of these models on the field alert reports data. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question for Dr. Rakala is the following. How did the human experts interface with the algorithm development process to continually improve the model performance?
Sure. It's definitely a work in progress. And I think, the regular cadence of communication here is important. And it's sort of an interesting point, right? Because the center of all of our models is, again, human experts being at the center of what we do. So iterative continuous model evaluations are performed by our subject matter experts for model improvements. One way we do that is by reviewing the false positives and providing expert input on rare events, identifying any commonly occurring themes to look for. So let me give you some examples when I say themes. You've heard from these presentations on the different clusters and the patterns that I've showed in the results. So this information can include any incident causing bacterial contamination, significant chemical physical changes, mistaken labeling. But again, this is, some examples, not just limited to these following. But what we then do is we convert this domain knowledge, right, from our reviewers and subject matter experts into consistent structured data. And the way we do that is by defining risk-based logical rules, which we use to train our machine learning model. And as you've seen, that's a hybrid machine learning model because those risk-based logical rules from the text predictors feed as an input into the classification of a low, medium, and a high risk, right? And then we automate this entire process. By using these digital technologies. Like I've spoken earlier, we have a cloud-based interface, an interactive dashboard, and we leverage open source programming languages such as Python, R, and we complement it with our in-house coding expertise to come up with these different methods that mimic the problem solving and decision-making capabilities of the human mind. So in short, we detect patterns and solve routine problems with more accuracy, efficiency than a human alone could ever handle. So it's really a teamwork here, integrating the human experts' intelligence with the algorithm development process to continually improve the model performance. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have one more question that just came in for Dr. Wakala, and here's the question. What algorithms did you use to develop the optimized hybrid model, and why is it called a hybrid model?
Thank you for that awesome question. So when I'm thinking about this, again, I would like to say that this is a hybrid model because we primarily researched, developed, and deployed a combination of two kinds of machine learning algorithms, right? So one was the unsupervised, wherein you have no supervision, you have no labels defined, or there's no target. And the other type is the supervised machine learning algorithms, where we have a defined label or a target. So we merged the output from these two different methodologies. So it's really a hybrid interface combining unsupervised and supervised machine learning algorithms. So hence, we call it the hybrid model. Now, what algorithms did we use to develop the optimized hybrid model? I can certainly talk about a couple here, but again, it's not limited to these. As technology advances and with the rise of AI and with the next AI revolution that we're gonna see, the models will evolve and we will continually improve them. But as of now, we deployed different NLP-based topic modeling algorithms to extract clusters, which then serve as text predictors that feed into a machine learning-based classification model. Right, so we again used open source programming languages. We used the libraries from R, Python programming, along with incorporating our domain knowledge, in-house coding expertise, to come up with the different parameters to fine-tune these different algorithms. Some of the algorithms I can talk about is latent semantic analysis. I'm not sure how much detail you want me to go into, but probably I'll just talk about the algorithms, and if there are more questions, I can take them later. We also have an optimized latent heuristic allocation algorithm. Again, this is a very optimized algorithm. It's based on a mathematical method for optimization. In short, it's a Gibbs-based sampling methodology. We also incorporate structural topic modeling algorithms. Now, this is also equally important because it incorporates metadata. And if you're wondering why we need three different algorithms, why just not have one? The simple answer is the data that we analyze is highly complex, and there's no one simple model that can solve the problem. So what we do is we leverage the advantages of each of these algorithms. We really focus on the pros of each of the algorithms and complement them together, such that the cons of one algorithm is addressed and complemented by the pro of the other algorithm. So that's why it's a combination of different algorithms, and this whole process develops into a hybrid model. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. We do have more questions that came in for Elise Murphy. And here's the first question from Ms. Murphy. Must the MEDRA code identified on the FAR be at the LLT level?
Thank you, Ray, so much for the question. It is advisable that if you know the root cause to that level, if you could identify at the LLT level, that would be really great. However, if you know the PT level and you don't know the LLT, we will take at the PT level as well. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a few more questions that came in for Ms. Murphy. And here's the next question. Can a DP manufacturer file an FAR and subsequently initiate market action, a recall, when they are not an ANDA or an NDA holder?
Ooh, that is a difficult question. So, all right, it sounds like, and if you could repeat the question for me again, it sounds like the question is when when should a recall be initiated? Is that the gist of the question?
I can repeat the question here. Is that basically can the DP manufacturer file an FAR and subsequently initiate a market action or a recall when they are not an ANDA or an NDA holder?
Okay, so they're really, thank you very much. There are really two different questions. If it's not an NDA or an ANDA, a field alert report would not be the proper mechanism. However, if you are going to, but if the product is misbranded or adulterated, then it is advisable that the DP manufacturer, the drug product manufacturer, contact our colleagues within the ORA recall coordinators in their geographic area to discuss initiating a recall. And there is guidance on initiation of a voluntary recall. So if it's not an approved NDA or an ANDA, and they're talking about and they're thinking about some type of recall or market action, I would state to begin with their ORA recall coordinators and talk with our colleagues within the field. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got several more questions from Ms. Murphy, and here's the next question. Is there a link you can provide to the MEDRA defect codes?
So thank you. MEDRA actually has a website, and if you type in MEDRA, it will, if you just Google it, it will come up. But I should inform our viewers and hearers that it is a subscription-based database. So just to let you know that as well. But if you just type in the word MEDRA, it should, the data site should come up. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got another question that sort of sets the background before the question, and here's the background for Ms. Murphy. If an OOS is obtained and the results were generated at the testing site, also the testing site is located in a different jurisdiction than the manufacturer, should the FAR be sent to the testing site jurisdiction or the manufacturing?
So thank you. Another very interesting question. And this would show the, you need some agreement between, let's say, a contract manufacturer and the applicant holder. And hopefully their agreement would come prior to manufacturing, and it should state, their agreement should state if there is a deviation that the manufacturer, the contractor, is going to notify the applicant holder. But when there is a deviation, let's say, and it's in a different geographical jurisdiction than the applicant holder, there should be rapid communication to the applicant holder so they can submit a field alert report when there is a deviation. And even if they don't, either the manufacturer or the applicant holder they're not aware of exactly what the nature of the deviation, the root cause is. They should know what the deviation is, but if they don't know what the root cause is, they can still submit a FAR to the agency with the term TB to be determined. But what we do recommend, of course, is that, okay, that's the initial field alert report, that you do come in with, that you do submit a final and a follow-up and a final FAR outlining the root cause, and of course, the corrective action for that particular root cause so there is not reoccurrence. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a couple more questions that just came in for Ms. Murphy. And the first one is regarding market complaints. A company does not often have sufficient information within 3 days to determine if the complaint is substantiated. The company needs time to investigate. What should the company do in these cases?
So thank you, Ray. The complaint system is a little bit different in that your complaint, the manufacturer's complaint system should be predefined. So for instance, every complaint does not necessarily lead to a field alert report, but the complaint in 211.198 should state, okay, what is your threshold for, first of all, how many complaints should be the threshold for a field alert report. So your complaint system should identify, and your QC, of course, is involved in this as well, should be involved in looking into the root cause of that complaint. But your complaint system is different from the field alert report. Your complaint system is you have documented controls, you have SOPs created to outline exactly how your manufacturer, how your applicant holder will handle your complaints. So typically, what we've been seeing is that manufacturers and applicant holders, they have their own databases to track and trend their complaints. But there should be a threshold. A complaint doesn't necessarily, because of you do have to investigate thoroughly when you receive a complaint. But a complaint doesn't necessarily lead to a field alert report, but there should be indicated within the standard operating procedure of that applicant holder exactly when a complaint leads into a field alert report. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have one final question from Ms. Murphy regarding MEDRA coding. At the time of an initial FAR, the most specific code may not be determined at that time. Can you change the MEDRA code in a follow-up FAR or a final FAR?
So thank you for the question. Absolutely, we are aware that a root cause, you're in your initial investigation, you're going down one pathway, and you may think that, okay, we've got the root cause analysis under, we know the specific root cause, and then it turns out that root cause, because of the systems are integrated, of course, in manufacturing, it may be something else. So yes, you're definitely able to come in, submit a amended, if you will, field alert report, follow up, and final. But you would just identify and you would reference the first field alert report, and then you would specify that in your root cause investigation, you acquired additional information, and here's the additional information with the data that you've compiled as well. And so you're actually changing your MEDRA code based on new data that you have been provided. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. Moving on to our next panelist, we have some more questions that came in for Melissa Furness. And here is the first question from Ms. Furness. How long does a sponsor have to submit a final FAR root cause analysis?
That's a good question. Thanks for that question. Currently, there are no specific reporting timelines for the final FAR submission, but I would say that it should be done within close proximity of folks concluding their investigation.
Thank you for responding to that question. I have a few more questions for Ms. Furness, and here's the next question. If a final FAR is not submitted if the RCA is still in progress, MF, whether follow-up FAR is mandatory, and what is the timeline?
So a final FAR isn't required, and there's no specific reporting timeline currently, but it is recommended. I think it's always a good idea to sort of close things out with the agency to let us know about sort of your final identification of your root cause and your corrective action plan.
Thank you for responding to that question. I've got a few more questions that came in from Ms. Furness. And here's the next question. Is a consumer complaint submitted via MedWatch required or voluntary?
So consumer complaints that are submitted via MedWatch are voluntary.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving on to our next question from Ms. Furness is the following. Are FARs and BPDR submission required or voluntary?
So both FARs and BPDRs are post-approval reports that are required under 314.81 and 600.14 respectively. Thanks.
Moving on to our next panelist, we've got a few more questions that did come in for Nandini Rakala. Here's the first question, and it is regarding AI and machine learning. What will happen with AI and machine learning? Will it lead to false positive?
Hello. Thank you for that question. That's a great observation. And if I'm understanding your question correctly, you're asking me whether AI and machine learning will lead to altering the false positives or altering the false positive rate. So hoping my assumption is correct here. The answer is yes. However, it is really important to account for these false positives as we don't want to overreact in every situation, right? So the key here is to use appropriate validation procedures. And by validation, I mean an assessment of how accurate a model is in predicting new data. It's a fascinating concept, right? However, the metrics themselves don't give the complete picture of a model performance. It has to be complemented with the human experts addressing inherent biases in the data. For example, we cannot just solve problems with the same thinking that created those problems in the first place, right? So we have to make sure that these performance evaluation metrics that we are using to build the model, the validation set that we are using to fine-tune the model, and the test set that we are using to compare the models are all selected appropriately using the appropriate parameters in the first place. And then evaluate the performance and cross-validate the accuracy using different metrics such as area under the curve, the recall, the precision rate, and therefore bring them all together and then really evaluate how accurate is the model, and then revalidate it with the SME's input, like the subject matter input. So what we are predicting, are we actually seeing that in real? And if so, by how much are we deviating from the norm, and what are the different criteria that we're using to make those predictions? So yeah, I think I might have answered your question. If not, feel free to add any follow-ups. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving on to our next panelist, we've got more questions that came in for Elise Murphy. And here is the first question. In the FAR regulation, it states a significant change should be reported. What constitutes a significant change?
Thank you, Ray, for the question. We do get that question sometimes. A significant change, what constitutes a significant change? So as outlined in or outstated in the regulation under 21 CFR 314.81B1, it could be defined as a failure of the drug product to meet specifications, either chemical or microbiological. It could also be assay failure, degradation, any out of specification result, a percentage change in the assay from its initial value, anything that's going to make the product adulterated or misbranded, anything that would affect the identity, the strength, the purity, or stability of the drug product, I would define as a significant change. Thank you, Rand.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a few more questions that came in from Ms. Murphy, and here's the next question. What common errors has FDA observed in FARs submitted by applicant holders?
So thank you for the question, Ray. Some of the errors that we have observed are, we receive one FAR with multiple applications. Our recommendation is that each FAR should specify one application with the primary defect and its root cause and CAPA. Another error we see is minimal root cause information on the 3331A form. We are looking for a thorough root cause investigation. And when we don't get that information, it just causes us to have to contact the applicant holder for additional information requests. So if you don't want FDA to contact your organization, please provide us with enough information on the root cause and the CAPA. And I guess another error we do see on the 3331A form is the reporting establishment lists the drug manufacturer instead of the NDA applicant holder. So those are just some of the errors that we see on the field alert report forms. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a question that came in regarding contract manufacturing, and here's the question from Ms. Murphy. When an applicant holder contracts part or all of their manufacturing supply chain to another entity, and there is a deviation in the drug product, who is responsible for submitting an FAR?
So thank you, Ray. When an applicant holder, the applicant holder is ultimately responsible to file the field alert report. However, that doesn't negate the contractual manufacturing organization. They should be in agreement with one another. There should be a predefined in terms of their contract as to how quickly the communication when there is a deviation. And so who is ultimately responsible? It's the NDA A&D applicant holder. However, in the contractual agreement, I would say whether it's manufacturing, the whole manufacturing, holding, packaging, labeling, whatever service is provided by that CMO, it should be outlined pre-service, if you will, as to how they're going to communicate with one another when there is a deviation, but ultimately it's the applicant holder that's responsible for filing the field alert report to the agency. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you for answering that question. We've got another question just came in trying to establish the relationship between a recall and a field alert report. And here's the question. What is the relationship between a recall and a field alert report? And does a FAR always lead to a recall?
So thank you, Ray. So let's first begin with the commonality between the two. FARs are submitted to the agency as a statutory obligation for an adulteration or misbranding within, of course, 3 working days. Recall can be initiated for the same reason, misbranding or adulteration. However, recalls are voluntary. A FAR, as I said, is mandatory. However, for recall, it is recommended if there is a misbranding or adulteration that the manufacturer engage with the recall coordinator, with our ORA recall coordinators in their geographic area to discuss and begin initiation of a recall. And as I indicated before, there is a guidance document of initiation of voluntary recalls under 21 CFR Part 7, Subpart C. And it's a guidance for industry, and colleagues within CDER also worked on this as well in our Office of Compliance. So thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got just a couple more questions. And here's the next question. Is CDER, the Center for Drug Evaluation Research, responsible for vaccines?
So, no, the CBER, Center for Biologic Evaluation and Research, is responsible for the vaccines, for allergenics, for in vitro diagnostics, non-reproductive human cells, tissues, cellular and tissue-based product. So the vaccines are the responsibility of our colleagues within the Center for Biologic Evaluation and Research.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. Looks like we have one more question for Ms. Murphy. And here is the question. If an applicant manufactures a monoclonal antibody and a vaccine, must they report separately to CDER and CBER?
So if there is thank you, Ray, for the question. If there is a deviation to their therapeutics and vaccines, yes, the BPDR must be filed separately and because they're handled by 2 different centers, the Center for Drugs and Center for Biologics, and they'll have 2 different reporting structures. So yes, if a manufacturer is making a monoclonal antibody that comes under a CDER, comes under a CDER regulated product, and they are making a vaccine as well, that they will be reported under 2 different reporting structures, and they will have to be filed separately. So thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. I want to thank all of our panelists and presenters for responding to numerous questions that came in. We've got a few extra minutes that we'll head into our break just a little early to return at 2:25 p.m. Eastern. Please enjoy your break. Moving into our presentations, the first is a report on the state of pharmaceutical quality that will be discussed by Dr. Neil Steiber, Associate Director for Science and Communications, Office of Quality Surveillance and OPQ in CDER. Next, we'll learn how field alert reports and biological product deviation reports are utilized within the site selection model. Our presenter, John Wan, is a supervisor Office of Quality Surveillance and OPQ in CDER. And for our third presentation, it will be on a pre-approval decisions on pre-approval inspection and pre-license inspection. Our presenter, Dr. Derek Smith, is the Deputy Director of the Division of Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Assessment within the Office of Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Assessment and OPQ. Then we'll learn about pharmaceutical quality system assessments by welcoming back Alex Veman, who is the Division Director in the Division of Quality Intelligence 2 within the Office of Quality Surveillance and OPQ. For our final presentation in the session, we'll discuss site dossiers. Our presenter, Milva Melendez, is a supervisory consumer safety officer in the Division of Quality Intelligence 2 within the Office of Quality Surveillance and OPQ. Please join me to welcome our first presenter, Dr. Steiber.
Hello, I'm Neil Steiber in CDER's Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, Office of Quality Surveillance, and I have the pleasure to speak with you about the report on the state of pharmaceutical quality. The learning objectives for today's talk are to understand what the report on the state of pharmaceutical quality, also called the RSPQ, is, and moreover, to understand how post-market quality data are used in the RSPQ. We'll begin with some background on the RSPQ, talk about its use of post-market quality data, and then provide some examples of post-market quality data in prior RSPQ reports. To begin with, the RSPQ is an annual report. It characterizes the state of pharmaceutical quality for human drugs that are legally marketed in the U.S. The RSPQ provides a wealth of information to the public. This information is helpful in a number of ways. It can encourage improvements in quality for manufacturers of drug products. It can also provide insights on future directions that the agency is going in quality surveillance. Overall, the information that's provided in the RSPQ enables analysis of key factors that impact pharmaceutical quality. The RSPQ is a rich source of information. It includes indicators of quality based on analysis of data for site compliance, post-market reporting, and product testing. The information in the RSPQ can be used to infer insights and trends about site quality and product quality. It is important to note that all of the assessments and data provided in the RSPQ are abstracted to high-level groups. For example, industry types, product types, countries, etc. This means that none of the data in the RSPQ includes information about individual firms. We're currently working on the 5th annual RSPQ. It should be available soon. We hope that you'll take a look at it and have a chance to review some of the prior RSPQ reports that we've produced over the past 4 years. Now let's look at some highlights from prior RSPQ reports. Starting with the fiscal year 2020 report on the state of pharmaceutical quality. One thing to note that's important is that there are multiple mechanisms for reporting product quality concerns. Today we're talking a lot about the FAR and the BPDR, but the RSPQ also includes information about MedWatch and consumer complaints. Here you can see the number of reports of each of those types that FDA received in fiscal year 2020. All of these data are analyzed in context with other data, and that's important to seek trends. For the purposes of the RSPQ, product quality defect reports are grouped into 20 different defect categories. These are defect categories that are defined specifically and aggregated in that way for use in the RSPQ. As you can see on the right, this is a pie chart taken from the fiscal year 2020 RSPQ that shows the top defect types over a 5-year span of fiscal year 16 through 2020. We found that 3 defect categories accounted for 60% of all defects reported. These defect categories are product quality questioned, device issues, and packaging issues. Now let's move to the fiscal year 2020 RSPQ. As you can see from the numbers here, there were a similar number of product quality defect reports that FDA received. Approximately 12,000 MedWatch reports, 4,000 FAR, 200 BPDR, and 200 to 300 consumer complaints. These data provide a rich source of post-market information that helps us and the FDA and helps you and the public better understand the state of pharmaceutical quality. In the fiscal year 2021 RSPQ, we also shared some research on FAR submissions and the relationship to site quality. We explored FAR submission rates and the characteristics of the sites to better understand the factors that reflect site quality. For this research, we looked at 4 years of data from fiscal year 18 to 2021 and found that there were about 1,100 sites during that time period who were eligible to submit a FAR. One finding that we came up with is that sites that did not submit FAR tended to be foreign, producing non-sterile products, and have fewer approved applications. As you know from the talks already today, a FAR is required when a manufacturer becomes aware of significant quality problems with distributed drug products. Those are the requirements for an initial FAR. However, there are no similar requirements for a follow-up or final FAR. Nevertheless, submitting follow-up and/or final FAR are recommended because they indicate the completion of an investigation. One thing that this research found is that 97% of sites who submitted an initial FAR also submitted at least one follow-up FAR or final FAR. This was a very encouraging finding. The FDA believes that submission of FAR is regarded as an attribute of a healthy pharmaceutical quality system. So submitting the FAR reports is a good thing, and the FDA appreciates receiving them. Thank you for listening to this presentation. I would like to end by summarizing a few key points. First, reliable data on FAR and BPDR are essential for providing an accurate picture of pharmaceutical quality. The reliability of data has a couple of key components. The first is the prompt reporting of FAR and BPDR reports. The second is complete reporting that includes follow-up and final reports as appropriate. I also want to emphasize that the RSPQ presents data, including FAR and BPDR, that are abstracted to high-level groups. This includes industry types, product types, and countries. And in doing so, the RSPQ does not share any data about individual firms. Now let's have a challenge question. Okay, during fiscal year 2020 and 2021, the annual number of FAR and BPDR reports that were submitted to FDA was approximately A, 10,000 FAR and 1,000 BPDR, or B, 4,000 FAR and 200 BPDR, or C, 1,000 FAR and 10,000 BPDR, or D, 200 FAR and 4,000 BPDR. The answer is B, 4,000 FAR and 200 BPDR. Hope you've learned a lot from this presentation. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Neil. Good afternoon. My name is John Wan. I'm a supervisor in the Division of Quality Data Science under the Office of Quality Surveillance. The learning objectives for these sessions are: identify the section in the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act where a risk-based schedule is codified. List the factors used in the CDER risk-based site selection model. Explain how FAR and BPDR are used in the CDER risk-based site selection model. CDER's risk-based site selection model. FDA implemented the risk-based approach to prioritize human drug manufacturing sites for routine cGMP surveillance inspection in fiscal year 2005. It replaced the previous approach, which was primarily based on the biannual inspection frequency. The FDA Safety and Innovation Act of 2012 amended Section 510 of the FD&C Act with the requirement that FDA inspect drug establishment in accordance with a risk-based schedule that consider establishment's known safety risk. This defined risk-based inspection frequency for all sites, regardless of location, to promote parity in inspectional coverage and effective and efficient use of FDA resources to address the most significant public health risk. CDER's risk-based site selection model and CDER's site surveillance inspection list. The SSM considers risks to drug quality as may arise from violations of cGMP requirements. The SSM uses risk factors to generate CDER's site surveillance inspection list. The SSIL prioritized the sites for routine surveillance inspection. Here are the risk factors stated in the FD&C Act. The compliant history of the establishment. The record, history, and nature of recalls linked to the establishment. The inherent risk of the drug manufactured, prepared, propagated, compounded, or processed at the establishment. The inspection frequency and history of the establishment, including whether the establishment has been inspected pursuant to Section 704 within the last 4 years. Whether the establishment has been inspected by a foreign government or an agency of a foreign government recognized under Section 809. The compliant history of establishments in the country or region in which the establishment is located that are subject to regulation under this Act, including the history of violation related to product exported from such country or region that are subject to such regulation. Any other criteria deemed necessary and appropriate by the Secretary for purposes of allocating inspection resources. Simply put, SSM generates a risk-based score for each site. The site score is based on empirical evidence collected by FDA, subject matter experts' judgment, or a combination of both. The following are currently identified as risk factors in the SSM. Site type, time since last surveillance inspection, or if the site was never previously inspected. FDA compliance history, compliant history of country or region, foreign regulatory authority inspectional history with an authority deemed capable under Section 809 of the FD&C Act, patient exposure, hazard signals, FAR, BPDR, recalls, and others. Inherent product risk. The SSM has been continually improved, and the current SSM complies with risk criteria in Section 510 of the FD&C Act. The SSM is annually reviewed and adjusted as needed. Just to reiterate, the final calculation of the model is a risk score that is based on the following criteria: compliant history, inherent product risk, facility type, time since last inspection, hazard signals, and exposure. Each component is weighted to produce the final score. A high score suggests that if there is a manufacturing quality problems at the site, the impact on public health is likely to be greater. FAR and BPDR are some of the hazard signals contributing to the model. As a reminder, holders of approved new drug applications and abbreviated new drug applications are required to submit field alert reports to FDA as necessary per regulation. The manufacturer who holds the biological product license and who had control over the product when a deviation occurs must submit Biological Product Deviation Report per regulation. Deficiencies of reporting FAR and BPDR are identified during scheduled inspection, and respective firms are cited for failure to comply with FAR regulations and failure to comply with BPDR in the establishment inspection reports. By text mining EIRs, scoring of the hazard signals also includes sites that should have reported but failed to do so. In summary, CDER risk-based site selection model use risk factors consistent with Section 510 of the FD&C Act. SSM calculate a score for each facility using risk-based factor. Factors in SSM includes compliance history, inherent product risk, facility type, type and status inspection, hazard signals, and exposures. FAR and BPDR are some of the hazard signals contributing to the model. And here are the challenge questions. CDER risk-based site selection model uses risk factor consistent with which section of the FD&C Act? Section 704, Section 809, or Section 510? The answer is C, Section 510. Challenge question number 2. What type of signals are FAR and BPDR in the CDER risk-based site selection model? Traffic signals, hazard signals, or analog signals? The answer is B. I hope you've done well on the challenge questions. Thank you very much for your time.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to provide an overview of how the Office of Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Assessment incorporates FAR and BPDR information into our risk-based facility assessments. Briefly, my talk will give an overview of OPMA's facility assessment associated with OPQ's application quality assessment, and will specifically discuss how FARs and BPDRs are factored into our risk-based decisions on whether to conduct an inspection or remote regulatory assessment. The Office of Pharmaceutical Quality conducts a team-based quality assessment of NDAs, ANDAs, and BLAs and their associated supplements. OPMA focuses on the manufacturing components of the application, including the process, facility, and microbiology controls. OPMA's science and risk-based assessment focuses on the suitability of the manufacturing process and microbiology data as submitted in the application to ensure consistent manufacturing product quality at the commercial scale. This assessment includes the capabilities of the facility to implement the proposed control strategy, which may be evaluated through pre-approval or pre-license inspections or remote regulatory assessments. OPMA's integrated manufacturing assessment includes basic information from the application that supports an understanding of the inherent risk of the product from its attributes. This inherent risk is used to develop initial risk assessments for the manufacturing processes and the facilities that are proposed for the commercial manufacturing. These initial risk assessments then guide the evaluations of each manufacturing unit operation, as well as the sterility assurance controls. Each assessment also looks at other factors that may reveal risks to successful implementation of the manufacturing process at the commercial scale. The assessment concludes with an overall summary and a final risk assessment that informs future surveillance and post-marketing activities. The integrated manufacturing assessment is included in OPQ's knowledge-aided assessment and structured application approach. On the slide is a high-level overview of how OPMA considers risk as a part of its application assessment. As noted previously, the initial risk designation is developed using questions that are common to all facilities and all unit operations. The risk assessment is further enhanced through questions on specific unit operations. Assessors input their responses to the questions based on the application information, and an algorithm identifies the initial risk areas that guide the extent of application assessment to ensure that risk mitigation studies and strategies are acceptable to support approval of the proposed commercial manufacturing process. So I know some in the audience may now be wondering, how does this all connect to FARs and BPDRs? So diving into the details of the facility components of our integrated assessment, we consider many factors, including how the formulation attributes and associated manufacturing risks impact scale-up, the manufacturing complexity, potential contamination issues, manufacturing deviations with the clinical or submission batches, and quality surveillance intelligence to determine if further assessment of the facility is necessary to demonstrate that the facility has the capability to implement the proposed commercial manufacturing process. Should we determine further assessment is necessary, we have two options: inspections, or what has been called alternative tools to evaluate the facility through remote regulatory assessments or from information or other regulatory authorities. So how does OPMA consider FARs and BPDRs? As a part of our assessment of the surveillance intelligence information, we look at the past inspections to ensure cGMP compliance and capability to manufacture the process and product as proposed in the application. Outside of the inspection history, quality signals are key to understanding the effectiveness of the facility's pharmaceutical quality system and its ability to successfully manufacture the new product at commercial scale and incorporate it into routine commercial production. FARs and BPDRs provide quality defect signals to consider in our risk-based manufacturing assessment. However, we do not always interpret these reports as negatives that increase risks. We see risks when manufacturers are not reporting FARs and BPDRs timely and are not providing complete investigations. In addition, if the reports signal trends that are not being properly addressed or signal issues with products manufactured similar to or signal issues occurring with products manufactured similar to the application we are assessing, we would potentially consider further evaluation of the facility. Conversely, if FARs and BPDRs are received timely, provide a complete investigation in CAPA, and show continual improvement considerations, OPMA may have increased confidence that the facility's pharmaceutical quality system is capable of manufacturing the new commercial product that we're evaluating. So just one example to demonstrate this. Numerous consumer complaints with potential packaging issues led to an applicant submitting FARs to the agency. The applicant did not adhere to the initial FAR timelines, and that led to concerns about the PQS's, the pharmaceutical quality system's effectiveness, and why there was a delay in reporting to the agency these issues. However, as the facility began to conduct a thorough analysis of the potential root causes, they were able to demonstrate the robustness of the packaging visual detection system. They were not able to duplicate the complaints on the manufacturing line. And they were able to identify continual improvements that would enhance the current packaging and visual detection systems to prevent occurrences. So for a time period, there was a concern because the FARs continued to remain frequent and constant, and the FARs were reporting similar issues. However, over time and through various other channels, the FARs, various other consumer outreach approaches, the applicant and the facility were able to implement continual improvements and assurances that the packaging system was robust and the visual inspection system was robust. So as we were evaluating an application for a product that was manufactured on the same packaging line in the same packaging configuration, we decided to forego a pre-approval inspection of the facility in support of the application because of the effectiveness of and thoroughness of the FAR and the corrective actions to the issues that the facility was observing. So I hope you all found this information helpful and to understand the value of FARs and BPDRs in our application and assessment. Before I head to my summary, I have a challenge question for you. Which of the following statements is not true? A. If I submit FARs and BPDRs, my facility may be subject to more frequent pre-approval or pre-license inspections. B. Taking actions to minimize trends in FARs and BPDRs through continual improvement may not lead to pre-approval or pre-license inspections. Submitting FARs and BPDRs late may increase the likelihood of pre-approval or pre-license inspections. So take a moment, think about the answer. For those of you that selected A, you are correct. So you will not automatically be inspected for applications just because of FARs or BPDRs being submitted to the agency. So in summary, FARs and BPDRs are an important source of surveillance intelligence to provide insight into the effectiveness of the pharmaceutical quality system to aid OPMA's risk-based manufacturing assessment. As shown in the case study, thorough, timely, and complete investigations of CAPAs can help mitigate the need for pre-approval and pre-license inspections by providing confidence in the operations at the facility and their capability to implement products that are manufactured similar to what they have experience with. So I look forward to taking any questions that you guys may have during the Q&A session. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. And thank you for the opportunity to speak with you again today. My name is Alex Beeman, and I'm a Division Director in the Office of Quality Surveillance. I spoke with you earlier on how we are modernizing the oversight of field alert reports, BPDRs, by applying AI and machine learning techniques. And now I'll be speaking with you on how we are utilizing and leveraging information obtained in FARs and BPDRs to inform our assessment of how effective a pharmaceutical quality system is. And ICH-Q10 really laid out the framework for what the PQS is, and it described one comprehensive model for an effective pharmaceutical quality system that is based on International Organization for Standardization, ISO, quality concepts. It includes the applicable good manufacturing practice regulations and complements ICH Q8 and Q9 on quality risk management. And ICH Q10 is a model for a pharmaceutical quality system that can be implemented throughout the different stages of a product life cycle. Much of the content of ICH Q10 is applicable to manufacturing sites that is currently specified by regional GMP requirements. At the conclusion of today's talk, attendees will learn how OQS utilizes FARs and BPDRs to inform the assessment of a PQS, and will also learn how OQS utilizes field alert report data in conjunction with predictive analytics to reduce uncertainty. So a little bit of background, and to answer the overall question of why. Why is a PQS assessment needed? The publication of ICH Q12 on the technical and regulatory considerations for pharmaceutical product lifecycle management provides a framework to facilitate the management of post-approval CMC changes in a more predictable and efficient manner. Within Q12, it includes regulatory tools and enablers that should enhance industry's ability to manage post-approval changes effectively and with, and this is very important, less need for extensive regulatory oversight. Through this concept, it can and should incentivize behaviors and practices that drive continual improvement by providing an opportunity for greater flexibility in managing change within the PQS. However, for the FDA to have confidence in the establishment to manage change without extensive oversight, an effective PQS is necessary. What does a PQS assessment look like? What is included? What elements are included? What information is utilized? Well, essentially, we break it down into two components. First, a qualitative assessment, which is conducted by SMEs with backgrounds in GMP assessments, pharmaceutical sciences and manufacturing, engineering, etc., They assess data and information related to an establishment to ensure adequate oversight of product quality. Again, utilizing the ICH-Q10 framework. It is a systems-based approach across the portfolio of products manufactured at that establishment, looking at information from a holistic perspective based on numerous inputs. The second component is a more quantitative aspect, utilizing historical and training data to track performance and make predictions for certain PQS key performance indicators. What information is utilized for a PQS assessment? This slide has a list of current and future considerations. Things like annual reports, APQRs, inspection reports, and why we are here today, information from product quality defect reports, such as field alert reports and BPDRs. Also, moving into the future, things like quality metrics and quality management maturity can and will play a critical role into quantifying the effectiveness of the PQS. This slide provides a snapshot of some of the questions we are trying to answer when retrospectively looking at FAR and BPDR information as part of our assessment. Things like, was the issue effectively escalated internally for submission to FDA in a timely manner? Playing into the role of, do we have assurance that there is an effective internal communication process to escalate issues? Is there evidence that a structured approach is utilized to perform an adequate investigation and identify root cause? How is this investigation conducted? Which approaches were used to identify root cause? Does the CAPA that is being proposed or implemented result in improvements and enhanced process understanding? Very important. Are effectiveness checks performed? How are they assuring the effectiveness of the CAPA? What criteria are being used? Moving forward, do we see a trend that would indicate ineffective actions or recurring issues, repeat problems, right? Are there multiple FARs or BPDRs where the failure occurs in the same system, packaging, materials, production, laboratory controls, etc.? Right? These things are important to tell us how effective the CAPA programs are into resolving and preventing future occurrences and tracking problems. So I do not want to spend too much time on this slide, but below is a list of elements, again, in reference to the ICH-Q10 framework, that are assessed as part of our PQS assessment. Things ranging from management commitment to change management, resource management, internal communication processes, as I spoke to in the previous slide, continuous improvement, effective CAPAs, management of outsourced activities. Essentially, how effective are they at minimizing availability risks, oversight around their supply chain, knowledge gained and managed in an effective manner that can inform, and are they utilizing quality risk management principles to effectively manage change, to drive continuous improvement, gaining insights from process performance and product quality monitoring? How is then management leveraging those insights gained to drive continual improvement? And the list goes on. Now moving forward, I'm going to cover the quantitative component of the PQS assessment. You may wonder why this is needed. Essentially, it was developed and researched to fill an information gap and reduce uncertainty. And we're doing this through the application of predictive analytics and modeling. Since certain elements of the ICH-Q10 framework have not been routinely covered on routine GMP inspections, we needed a way to fill this information gap. The first thing that was done is research related to which KPIs are currently being utilized and are effective at quantifying the effectiveness of a PQS. This was done leveraging research done by third parties, industry feedback, etc. Then we had to figure out, okay, out of those KPIs that are currently being utilized, what internal data do we have that can act as a surrogate? Well, the answer we found was within field alert reports, for example, because we track information related to the investigation. Things like, okay, we have a time frame of when the report was identified, when it was submitted to the agency, when the final report when the follow-ups and finals were submitted. That can act then as a surrogate for the investigation time. What was the CAPA that was implemented? What was the root cause of the problem? Is it a repeat problem? Etc. Right? Therefore, using those data, we can calculate certain KPIs, as you can see on this slide, right? From investigation time, repeat deviation, CAPA effectiveness, and human error. And I've also provided the definition for each of those KPIs and the data inputs that are utilized to calculate them. Then, we appended those data with additional data we have about establishment. Things like inspection history, things like demographic data, and the list goes on to create a very, very composite list of potential predictors to then train and validate machine learning models that we can then deploy and score facilities on a fiscal year basis. So I know the font is small here, and it's probably hard to read without zooming in, but this is really going into the complexity of the process and trying to visually depict the pipeline that's used to train and build these models. And essentially what this is showing you is that for each of the KPIs, we train multiple models, compare them, and calculate performance characteristics of each of the models to choose and identify the best performing models to deploy in a production environment. Right? So some of the things you can see from the output, the models we explored, for example, neural nets, decision trees, gradient boosting, etc. And in the end, using the performance characteristics that you see on the bottom, average square error, etc., to then compare and identify the best performing model to deploy. So this part is a visual depiction of the output. And this is essentially how benchmarking can be done. So we are tracking the KPIs on a yearly basis for each facility, and then we're making predictions on an upcoming fiscal year. Obviously, this is based upon dummy data and doesn't represent actual metrics, because you can see here the predictions are on an FY22 basis, right? But you can see that we are tracking the KPIs over time, and then benchmarking the establishment against other like establishments. So we subset them and stratify them into the appropriate subpopulations, like sterile manufacturer within the US, etc. And then benchmark them against other like facilities to see how they're performing in comparison. As mentioned earlier, we are really trying our best through multiple initiatives to address the information gap that exists to perform a full and robust PQS assessment. And the application of predictive analytics and modeling is just one vehicle for doing this. And one of the advantages of what we're trying to do here is that even for facilities that haven't submitted field alert reports, we can still score them, right, and make predictions about their PQS performance. The other things that are happening to fill this knowledge gap, right, are things like the October 2022 revision to the compliance program that addresses this, in a sense, by adding elements of ICH Q9, Q10, and Q12. One other approach is through the assessment process. For example, potential IR questions to obtain critical information related to the effectiveness of the PQS when we have that critical gap. Knowledge management is also key. Ensuring effective communication to field investigators and the integration of information related to approved established conditions is a must to achieve better risk-based decisions. In the end, the assessment that OQS is performing here is intended to support the overall decisions about regulatory flexibility. In summary, FARs and BPDRs are an important factor when assessing the effectiveness of a PQS and are a rich source of information that can be leveraged to reduce uncertainty and enable better and timely and risk-based decisions by the agency. Now it's time for the challenge question. Which ICH guidance describes a comprehensive model for an effective PQS? The answer, B, ICH Q10. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for their time and attention today, and also thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. And we can't do this alone. Let's work together to improve global pharmaceutical quality, to improve the lives of patients. And I look forward to having a discussion with everyone.
Hello, everyone. My name is Milva Melendez. I am a Supervisor Consumer Safety Officer, and I work in the Office of Quality Surveillance, Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, Center for Drug Evaluation and Research at FDA. My pronoun is she and her. And today I'm here to talk to you about the PDR reports and Biological Product Defect reports and the site dossiers. Our objective in this presentation is to provide you with a very high-level understanding on how the FDA uses PDR reports and Biological Product Defect reports information for the site dossier process. So aligned with that, in today's presentation, I will be touching on these three topics: site dossiers, a high-level overview of what is a site dossier, how the FDA uses the information of PDR and BPDRs for the site dossier process, and finally, I will highlight some of the key aspects that OQS considers when we use this information in the site dossier process. The site dossier is the outcome of an internal and confidential process through which OQS assesses and reviews the state of control of the pharmaceutical quality systems at a given site at a given time, using what we know and the information that is available to us from the different data systems at FDA. The site dossier is one of the tools that OQS uses to communicate with other FDA offices and field operations to assist them when making decisions about possible areas of focus using risk management approach principles. The site dossier includes, and it's not limited to this information listed here. For example, the information in the registration and listing records of a firm, and that can include that information of registration can tell us what is the current status of the registration of the firm. Is a firm registered or not? What kind of operations is a firm registered for? Is a firm registered for a manufacturer, for packaging and labeling, for testing? Is it registered for OTCs or application products, etc.? Who is a point of contact for the firm? So it is very important that firms maintain the information in their drug registration and listing current, complete, and accurate. The site dossier also includes a drug product listing that describes which products the firm has at their site, which products they managed, what are the different type of products at the facility, what are the application type that they have, and much more. It also includes the history of inspection of a facility, if there is any FDA inspection history for that facility. Or it also can include the outcomes of inspections performed by other foreign regulatory agencies with whom the FDA has a mutual recognition agreement in place. The information submitted in different product defect reports, which includes the PDR reports, the BPDRs, MedWatch reports, and customer complaints, it's also included in the site dossier. The site dossier can also include quality metrics data if available and when available. In OQS, our goal is to understand how robust and effective is the pharmaceutical quality systems at a site. How well in control are they performing? Are they performing in a way that is compliance with regulations, that can ensure compliance with the regulations? How robust is the quality unit at the site? For example, does the quality unit has been given the responsibilities and authority as is described in the CFRs? And is that quality unit fulfilling their responsibilities? We wonder if the firm is complying with the reporting requirements from the regulation, or if there is any concern that a firm may be under-reporting. We wonder if there is lack of reporting of PDR reports and BPDRs. We also wonder if the firm has adequate procedures and robust processes in place to conduct investigation of failures and deviation at a site. And we wonder, how thorough are those investigations? Are those investigations conducted in a manner so that they are conducive to identifying the root cause or the most probable root cause of a failure or a deviation, so that they can implement adequate corrective and preventive actions? And when they do have a CAPA proposed, we wonder, does that CAPA appear to be adequate? And does the firm evaluate the effectiveness of CAPAs when it is appropriate to do so? And if the firm is conducting CAPA effectiveness checks, then we wonder, how do they perform that CAPA effectiveness check? We also try to understand, is the firm is conducting a holistic evaluation to better understand the state of control of each quality system when it is appropriate to do so? And if they're able to identify how the different quality systems are performing they performing in a state of control to ensure compliance with regulations, or are there changes needed? These are some of the things that we consider as we go through the information for the site dossier. So, for example, we evaluate the investigations, as I mentioned before, and how the firm addresses the root causes that are causing failures. And we ponder if the firm is conducting thorough investigations. Are they using a systemic approach? Which methods and procedures are they using? And if those methods and procedures are conducive to finding the root cause, or at least the most probable root cause for a failure. We seek to understand if the firm is managing the investigations in an expedited manner so as to minimize the exposure of patients to hazard conditions, hazardous products, and to promptly implement remediations in CAPA. We evaluate how well documented is the investigation, and if the documentation includes evidence that support the conclusions of the investigation. We wonder if those conclusions are unbiased and if they are scientifically sound. If the firm is conducting CAPA effectiveness checks, is that effectiveness check appropriate? Are they doing it in frequency enough? And what do they consider? How do they perform that? If the firm is evaluating the risk to product quality, we wonder if the firm evaluates the impact regardless if the batch has been released or not, and if the firm is considering the potential impact to other batches, regardless if those other batches have been distributed or not, if they have been released or not. And we wonder if the firm is able to recognize when there are systemic problems, and if they consider if the process continues to perform in a validated manner. Sometimes the failures could be an indication that the process has drifted from a validated state. Other times, they have to evaluate the CAPAs, the impact of the CAPAs on the validated state of a process. And they need to consider if there is a need to revalidate the process after those changes have been implemented. And at the end, what is the impact of the failure on the stability of the critical quality attributes of a drug product? Have they considered if it's necessary to place additional batches that may be impacted in the stability program? So we wonder all these things, and like I said, it's not all of it. In summary, FDA uses all the information available to us, including the information of field alert reports and BPDRs, to understand what is the level of maturity and how well the pharmaceutical quality systems are performing at a given site. The information helps FDA offices in making decisions, applying risk management principles. And finally, the information can also be used by field investigators to develop strategic inspection plans, applying science-based risk approach and quality systems approach. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention and for participating of this conference. I hope that the information I just shared with you today will assist you implementing robust systems and controls to ensure that the drug products at your facility are available to the public and that drug products have the intended characteristics of identity, safety, purity, strength, and efficacy as they claim to possess. Thanks, and if you have any questions, please share, and I will be very happy to help. Thanks.
Thank you all for the great presentations. We'll now enter into our final Q&A session. As a reminder, if you haven't had a chance to enter your questions in the Q&A chat pod, please do so now. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. We do have some questions coming in right now, and the first group of questions is for Dr. Neil Steiber. And here is the first question. What is the difference between product quality questioned and product quality issues?
Thanks, Ray. That's an important question, and I appreciate the opportunity to qualify that. So product quality questioned and product quality issues sound very familiar. And in fact, they do have a very similar meaning in the way that we've classified the product quality defects, but there is a difference in their usage. So the term product quality question is primarily used for MedWatch reports, and the term product quality issues is primarily used for FAR reports. And just to give a little bit more of an example on that, for the product quality questioned, which primarily comes up for MedWatch reports, examples would include formulation-related issues, such as thickness or viscosity being out of specification. And for the product quality issues that we would typically see in the FAR, an example would include an environmental issue that occurs during production, but for which there's no confirmation. And thank you for that question.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question for Dr. Steiber is the following. For hazard signals, what other hazard signals does FDA consider when no FARs are filed by organizations or for non-ANDA NDA holders?
Thanks again for an interesting question. And yes, there are many situations where FDA does not have FAR from a particular establishment. It could be because it's not an NDA or ANDA holder, or because they just haven't submitted any. And if the firm has not had any events or situations that would merit submitting a FAR, then there's no reason that they should have submitted a FAR. But in those situations, FDA then has other data and reports that we can look at. There are inspection outcomes from the facility that have a lot of details about the particular systems at that site. There are potentially recalls. There may also be MedWatch reports, or consumer complaints that are submitted. And so those are the other sources of information that we would use as hazard signals when there are no FAR. Thanks for that question.
Thanks for responding to that question. We've got a couple more questions that came in for Dr. Steiber, and here is the next question. What is meant, or can you provide further examples of the defects, product quality question, and physical issues?
Thanks for that question. That's a good follow-up on the first question. So we talked a little about the product quality issues, but with regard to physical issues could include, for example, cracked tablets, precipitation inside a bottle, or particulates that are found within the product. Thanks for that question.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have one final question for Dr. Steiber in this round, and here is the question. When will the FY 2022 report on the state of pharmaceutical quality be published?
Great question. We're all eagerly anticipating the FY 2022 RSPQ being published, and hope that you'll be looking for it when it is released. We expect it will be published within a month, hopefully sometime in around mid-June. So hopefully that will be a good source of information and a meaningful follow-up on the prior reports. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. Moving on to our next panelist, we have a few questions that came in for John 1. And the first one is a combination question addressed to John 1 and also Dr. Derek Smith. And here is the question. For risk-based assessments of a firm's quality system, how does the agency differentiate between a lack of FARs due to a good quality system versus a lack of FARs due to noncompliance?
No audio.
John 1, this is the moderator. We can hear you. That is you speaking at this time.
Can you hear me?
Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. My apologies. As indicated from earlier presentations, there are a wealth of information that can be gleaned from the field alert report. We're able to look beyond just a count of field alert reports, but also the nature and content. For the non-compliance, those if not captured by the predictions, it will also be captured and discovered and cited by the inspections and other methods. I can turn it over to Derek for the second half of the questions, but there are more than just counts. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Yes, and I think one thing I talked about in my presentation was we're also looking at the trends and the frequency. So as we see these come in, depending on what we're looking at, we're making decisions. But in general, a lack of FARs, at least from the pre-approval assessment, may not give us quite the information we're looking. We would be looking for in the risk-based assessment of sort of the quality signals. But we would then look at other information in the application to make a decision. And then if we were to do an inspection, we would look at, as others stated earlier in their talks, whether the facility is appropriately investigating, reporting deviations to the agency. Thank you.
Thank you both for responding to that question. Moving on, we do have some more questions for John 1, and here is the next question. How are the risk factors defined and weighted in the CDER risk-based site selection model?
Thank you, Ray. The risk factors in the CDER risk-based site selection model includes compliance history, type of product, potential for patient harm, and other risk factors. These factors are scored and integrated to be an overall risk score. And so they are, in addition to codified by legislations, but also undergo a continuous process of review and readjustments according to the conditions. And so we continue to look at the signals and then continue to look at what's available out there for us to make the appropriate changes. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have some more questions for John 1, and here's the next question for Mr. Wan. Can you describe how the model adapts to changes in the environment or to new emerging risks?
I'll be more than happy to answer that. Thank you. I'm going to expand a little bit on what I just said earlier, where as environment and risk evolve, the model has a regular review process, and then we adjust by looking into new signals. So specific adjustments will be depending on the change in the environment of risk. And so more granular data becomes available that fits into the existing risk factors that are able to align with what we're able to do, we're able to incorporate them, and so that we are able to gather more clarity into the risk to public health based on the signals that's available to us. So it's a continuous improvement process. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have a few more questions for Mr. Wan, and here's the next question. How does the CDER risk-based site selection model incorporate historical data regarding site compliance and potential for harm to public health?
Thank you. So historical data at a site level is a key part of a risk-based model. Sites with a history of compliance issue might have an elevated risk score. Similarly, drug product with higher potential impact to public health may be associated with elevated risk score. And we look at them at the site level. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a couple more questions that came in from Mr. Wan, and here's the next question. How does the CDER risk-based site selection model ensure transparency for the industries being inspected?
Thank you. The model provides a structured, objective approach to risk-based inspection schedules. It's based on quantifiable risk factors. And while we are not able to provide a specific of the model, and we cannot fully disclose it, but you will find the general risk factors available in the CDER Manual of Policy and Procedures. I believe I put it in the link in my presentation at the bottom of each page. We continuously engage stakeholders like you via communication like this so that we are able to learn the conditions and then changing environment moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have one more question for Mr. Wan, and here is the question. How does the CDER risk-based site selection model fit into the broader regulatory strategy?
Thanks. The model is one of many that we use to regulate pharmaceutical industry. Like today's presentations, there are so many innovative efforts that we're moving forward. It complements many of the strategy like this one. So from post-market surveillance to adverse event reporting. So by focusing on inspection resources for high-risk sites, the model allows us to efficiently focus on the resources and prioritize intervention where they're most likely to reduce risk to public health. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. Moving on to our next panelist, we've got a few questions that came in for Dr. Derek Smith. And here is the first question for Dr. Smith. If FARs and BPDRs are post-approval reports, how do they determine if a pre-approval inspection would be needed?
Thank you for the question. Yes, so as a part of our pre-approval assessment, we're looking at, and it's described in the pre-approval compliance programs, the effectiveness of the facility to implement and maintain GMPs, while manufacturing products. And so the post-marketing reports for FARs and BPDRs are valuable in understanding how the facility is reacting to issues that come up during manufacturing, to then further inform how we're assessing the facility's capability to implement additional manufacturing processes and products within the facility. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a few more questions for Dr. Smith, and here's the next question. Reflecting on your comment regarding the demonstration of the effectiveness of the root cause analysis and CAPA effectiveness informing the risk-based assessments, what is the expectation for the level of detail and/or documentation to include in the final FAR?
Thank you. And I know some of the other presenters covered so I'll take this from sort of the pre-approval facility risk assessment angle. And so, within those final reports or even the initial reports, the thoroughness and completeness of the root cause investigation and how the facility is reacting and trying to mitigate recurrence of the issue is really key to understanding how well the facility is performing and capable of adding the new additional products. And so when we're looking at the FARs and BPDRs, if it is related to a similar product or a similar manufacturing process, the level of detail into the investigation will really help understand how the issues are resolved and may mitigate the need for further pre-approval inspections. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving on to our next question for Dr. Dr. Smith is the following. Can you elaborate on how you assess the CAPA effectiveness checks, such as inspection or any other resources, as we don't have the fields for in the FAR form?
Yes, this is a good follow-up to the question that I answered earlier. So when we're looking at the effectiveness of the CAPAs, yes, obviously there isn't sort of updates in the forms to include to the agency, but one of the ways that we see that is in the recurring frequency, and you saw that in the case study. There was for some time in that case study a frequency that we saw. And then eventually over time, as the continual improvements were implemented within the manufacturing facilities, we saw a reduction in the FARs and BPDRs. And so that's a way of understanding that the effectiveness of the CAPAs that were being implemented. And that obviously then led to the ability to mitigate the need for a pre-approval inspection. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to the questions. We've got one more question for Dr. Smith in this round, and here's the question. Is it important that we submit a follow-up or final post-market quality reports to help with the pre-approval and pre-license inspection decisions?
For once, I think the answer is yes from a regulator in one of these sessions. So yes, I mean, it would be very helpful in the pre-approval assessment to see final and complete FARs and BPDRs in a timely manner. If there are open investigations into issues that are going on in the facility that were reported to the agency, it would likely raise the risk and may trigger the decision to follow up at the facility on a pre-approval inspection. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. Moving on to our next panelist, we've got some questions that came in for Alex Veman, and here is the first question from Mr. Veman. I see that QMM is in the future state. Can you provide us with additional tools or webinars that will assist manufacturers in supporting QMM?
Thanks, Ray, and a great question. And how much time do we have? I'm just kidding. In all seriousness, yeah, there is a lot of resources available if one would be interested in finding out FDA's current thoughts on QMM, where we've been, where we're going. There's a public website on fda.gov. I would recommend just Googling FDA quality management maturity, and that will take you to a public website where you would be able to download recent journal articles as well as white papers, information related to our public meeting that we held last spring, as well as our advisory committee meeting that we held late last fall. There's a lot of good, rich resources there on that page that where one could learn more about FDA's current thinking related to QMM, as well as directionally where we are anticipating going.
Thank you for responding to that question. Do have a few more questions for Mr. Veman, and here's the next question. For the PQS assessment framework, are both the PQS of the manufacturer and of the applicant, if different, assessed?
Really good question right there. And yes, it is very critical and important that the applicant has adequate oversight of performance and has done proper due diligence and has monitoring strategies in place around the establishments that they're either contracting or having performed certain duties. Our PQS assessments are at an establishment level. So we do a PQS effectiveness assessment at an establishment level, not at an applicant level right now. And as I would really recommend those to read the draft guide, the Q12 implementation draft guidance published by the FDA, which walks through the process of how these PLCMs should be structured and provides recommendations related to that structure. And one of those, right, is to reference the FEI or establishment associated to the proposed established conditions within the PLCM. So that way it can trigger, from our perspective, when a PQS assessment would be needed for each of those establishments that is referenced in the PLCM, and that would be requesting some level of regulatory flexibility. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a couple more questions for for Alex Beeman, Mr. Beeman, and here is the next question. When does the agency perform the PQS for the firm?
Thanks, and a very good follow-on question to some of the things I just mentioned. And again, I would really advocate to not only read ICHQ 12, but also the draft implementation guidance from FDA, because that will walk you through, again, as I mentioned, the structure of PLCMs, proposed established conditions, proposed reporting categories. But essentially, to sum it up, when we perform a PQS assessment is, when a submission has proposed established conditions, and within those proposed established conditions, there is a proposed reporting category that would be requesting flexibility outside of what would typically be the reporting category that would be typically outlined in regulation or guidance. However, there are also other ways to request regulatory flexibility, such as identifying something as a non-EC. So in those cases as well, we would perform the PQS assessment for the establishments, those FEIs and establishments that are referenced against the proposed established condition or non-EC that is essentially requesting some level of regulatory flexibility.
Thank you for responding to that question. I have one more question that came in from Mr. Veman, and here's the question. What specific compliance program was updated in October 2022?
Great question. The compliance program that I was referring to was the surveillance program for the 5602 compliance program, but the pre-approval inspection program was also updated in October 2022. So both of those compliance programs were updated and revised. However, the one that I was referring to in my presentation was related to the surveillance drug quality inspections. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. Moving on to our next panelist, we have a few questions that came in for Milva Melendez, and here is the first question. How do the list site complaints data get into the site dossier, since not all are filed as a FAR or BPDR?
Good question. I like that. You brought that point. So, similar as firms receive consumer complaints, the FDA also receives complaints from consumers and the public in general. So, the public can submit complaints directly to FDA. In fact, FDA receives complaints in any forms, written, electronic, or oral communications regarding concerns with the quality of drug products. FDA encourages people submitting any information, to us as a complaint, to include supporting information as available as they can provide, and also contact information in case there's additional information and follow-ups that needed. We interview those consumers that report complaints to the FDA to try and get as much as understanding as possible about those concerns that they want to share with us. And so those are the complaints I was speaking of when I was talking in the site dossier, that type of complaint. So it's similar to the firms, right? You receive consumer complaints, you record them, you evaluate them, you investigate them. So it's kind of like a similar component at FDA. And so those are the complaints that are considered in the site dossiers, not the list of complaints that are received directly in the site or at the site. I hope that helps clarify.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a couple more questions that came in from Ms. Melendez. And here's the next question. When information of a FAR and a BPDR is used in site dossiers, what does that mean? Or does it mean that another group will review the reports again? And should firms expect more questions if another group reviews the FAR and BPDRs again?
Good one. So no, when we work on the site dossiers and through our process, we reviews at all the signals in a very holistic manner. So we try to cross-examine the information that we're getting from different places, right? So we have field alert reports, complaints, MedWatch reports, BPDRs. We also see the inspectional outcomes from other regulatory agencies, inspectional outcomes from previous FDA. And so we cross-examine that data and we try to understand if the firm if those if those issues in the field alert reports and BPDRs could be an indication that something was left unfinished, like an investigation may not have been thoroughly completed, a CAPA may not have been effective addressing a problem reported on the field alert report and BPDR. So we're not revisiting the field alert reports and BPDRs in the same manner that, for example, earlier this morning, the post-marketing surveillance group was explaining, Elise was explaining that, but rather in a more holistic manner to understand, is the firm implementing thorough investigations, effective CAPA? Can they self-assess thoroughly, basically, or is there a concern that there are problems that are recurring because the firm is not performing thorough investigations or addressing effective CAPAs? So that's really what it meant. So it's not revisiting the field alert report and BPDR, but it's a more holistic approach. Thank you for that one.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have one more question for Ms. Melendez, and here is the question. Is there a site dossier every time FDA goes to the firms for inspection?
No, as much as we would like to, not always. So the site dossier is requested by investigators to us, and we provide them to assist them with preparing a strategic inspection plan. But not necessarily every site has the site dossier to this point. Eventually, we hope to get to that, and we aspire to get to that level, but we're not there yet. But we're working our way to that.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. Moving up to the beginning of our panel, we've got a few more questions that came in from Dr. Neil Steiber. And here is the first question for Dr. Steiber. What can we expect to see in the FY 2022 report on the state of pharmaceutical quality?
Thanks for that question, and thanks for the opportunity to talk a little bit about the fiscal year 2022 RSPQ. It hasn't been published yet, as we said. Hopefully, you'll have an opportunity to read it in June. But just to give you a little bit of an essence of what you might expect in there. First of all, there's going to be continual tracking of the inventory of sites of drug manufacturing sites, as we have had in all of the RSPQ reports. And in particular, in this report, there'll be some insights about the location of manufacturing for essential medicines, showing the difference between APIs and finished dosage form manufacturers in their locations domestically and foreign, That's something I think is interesting that hopefully you'll have a chance to read in there. We also, in the recalls section, note that we had the highest number of recalls in the past 5 years occurred during fiscal year 22. And interestingly, more than a third of those recalls were due to 4 specific events. So in over 900 recalls, a third of them, more than a third of them, were due to 4 specific events. And those specific events are described a little bit in the RSPQ. And we think that's of interest. Also want to mention that sampling and testing has become more targeted. We've been using our sampling and testing program to, through more of a risk-based process to better identify products that we think are potentially non-compliant. And so in doing so, we've revealed a lot of products that are non-compliant, including many hand sanitizer products, many of which have unacceptable levels of impurities, and you can read about that a little bit. And then lastly, I want to mention that the upcoming RSPQ report has some significant updates in progress about emerging programs that FDA is developing, including the NIP, the New Inspection Protocols Project, QMM, which Alex spoke about, and you can find more about on the website, the Quality Management Maturity Program, and also with regard to our efforts in CARES amount reporting and collecting those data. So there's a lot of information in the upcoming RSPQ report, and I hope you'll have a chance to look at it. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have one more question for Dr. Steiber on the RSPQ, and it's the following. Does the FY 2022 RSPQ have any highlights about post-market quality reporting?
So thanks for that question, which ties in to the previous one. Post-market quality reporting continues to be an important part of the RSPQ. And I'll just note that in general, the product quality defect reports that we received in 22 were pretty similar to what received in the prior 2 fiscal years in 20 and 21. There was a slight increase in MedWatch reports in fiscal year 22 and a slight decrease in FAR, BPDR, and consumer complaints in 22. Hopefully you have a chance to read more about those in the upcoming report. Thanks for the question.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have one more question for Dr. Steiber, and here is the question. Does FDA penalize sites if they do not submit a follow-up FAR or a final FAR?
So thanks for the opportunity to emphasize that point, that FDA does not penalize firms for not submitting a follow-up FAR or a final FAR. Those are considered good practices. We certainly appreciate receiving them. It helps to show that a firm has completed its investigation, but they're not required, and there's no penalty per se for not submitting them. Thanks for that question.
Thanks for responding to that group of questions. We've got a few more questions that came in for Alex Veman. And here is the first question for Mr. Veman. Can you provide clarification between product quality defect reports? On slide 5, it states that FAR, MedWatch, and BPDR can be used.
Yeah, thanks, Ray, and I apologize if that added any confusion. So, using the term PQD, or product quality, post-market quality defect reports, that is really an aggregate of of field alert reports, BPDRs, MedWatch, et cetera. Some of these things that the presenters like Milv, Elise this morning talked about, Melissa, Derek, et cetera. Just using that term more broadly to say when we consider product quality defect reports, that is a function of things like field alert reports, BPDRs, et cetera. So I hope that provides clarity, Ray.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have a couple more questions. We're going to try it again. We're just about 3 minutes left here for Mr. Veman. And here's the next question. What other data elements are considered as potential predictors for the PQS models outside of FAR and BPDR elements?
Thanks, Ray. Great question, and essentially a lot. As I mentioned in my presentation, we use field alert report data as a surrogate to calculate these KPIs, the outcome data. But we also consider other parts of the field alert report as potential predictors in association with firm establishment data, demographic data, the types of products that they make, how many products they make, the diversity of products and profiles, the inspection history, the types of 483s that they've had in the past. Essentially, we throw what we can at it to identify important potential relationships there. So we really try to evaluate the predictive power of the different data elements we have about this site outside of just field alert reports and BPDRs, those types of things that I mentioned. So hopefully that provides a little bit more clarity on that topic as well.
Thank you so much for responding to that question. And that's all the times we have for questions in this session. We certainly like to thank the speakers and the panelists for the great presentations and answering numerous questions that came in. It's our pleasure at this time to welcome back Dr. Jennifer McGuire to provide us with some closing remarks. Welcome, Dr. McGuire.
Thanks, Ray. Yes, I just want to echo your sentiments. I want to give a huge thank you to our speakers for the efforts that they put into their presentations and for providing such rich content. I also want to really thank our audience. We've had great participation today, and the level of engagement that you showed through your fantastic questions is really outstanding. I couldn't have asked for a better outcome. I hope that you've learned something from this seminar. I minimally hope that you've learned that, it is required to submit your FAR and BPDR reports, but we do not use that information in a punitive manner. It's actually a sign of a very healthy and robust pharmaceutical quality system. So if you've learned nothing else, I hope you'll take away those 2 points. But obviously there is much more covered. So I hope you found this webinar really rewarding. So with that, Ray, I'll turn it back to you to close us out.